Hello everybody, it is me, Pacific. Look at this. Oh boy. Yeah. Welcome to winter. That being said, it's time to make a video. You know what, sports fans? Life is absolutely boring without the internet. And I'm going to tell you a few things today. We're going to talk about a little of this and that. Yeah. That's what we're going to talk about. Hold on. I am not impressed with HP. Let me tell you that from the start. That's Hewlett-Packard for people that don't know what I'm talking about. And if we get the cord under the door, then the door's shut. All right. I'm going in the closet because the household is busy today. Didn't do much today. Got some 5 sheets of drywall and some 2x4s so that he can finish off the room in there that we put the cement floor in, or had the cement floor put in, and sliding glass door. He said, "You work so fast, otherwise I'd have you help me, but then you'll get it all done and I won't have anything to do." The guy's in his 80s and he likes to putz and tinker and do projects, and that has kept him healthy and focused and alive. And I pray to God that in my 80s, Pacific Ocean Asia is still sailing as strong as he is right now. He got in my truck today. He hadn't been in it for quite a while, and he said, "Wow." He said, "I remember when these all had the big bench seat like this, and even the cars were that way." And I said, "I know, you can't get a car like this. You can't even get a pickup anymore like that, unless you buy the standard plain Jane edition." So a couple thoughts today. Sports fans, winter is here. I am not happy. Monday I went and ran errands. It was in the 60s. In 20 minutes it went shoo. And within 24 hours, the temperature changed 65 degrees. We had 9 below the other day. Winter came in hard, and it came in fast. Thanks to good old Alaska with their hurricane/storm system spinning around off the Aleutians, pushed all the way down into North America, and has brought colder, freezing temperatures to the United States. So, ran to Walmart today, got some stuff. And I actually, when I was going through the store, I thought, if life weren't so expensive, Pacific would be content just to put stuff away in a store. Off in the corner, just stocking stuff, doing your own thing. And then I could do that. Or working in the back of a warehouse with a forklift. I thought, there's some jobs that are actually fun, where you don't have to deal with the liability, you don't have to deal with the headaches, you just put stuff away. But 9-something an hour? Big downer. So Ebola. Some people have mentioned stuff, specifically Pyramid Head has said, "Why are we throwing money at this? YouTube offers $2 for every dollar, or $1 for every dollar that we throw in." So people have hinted around, what is Pacific's view on finding the cure, whether it be Ebola, breast cancer, whatever. Remember Jerry Lee Lewis telethons? They were legendary. They were interesting. And he raised a lot of money. And he never did find a cure. Was it MDA, Muscular Dystrophy Association? And then some people got all bent out of shape and said, "We're not Jerry's kids." Ugh. Wow. Jerry did try to do a good thing by raising money for something. I can't fault him for that. But what is Pacific's stance as a Christian and as an individual who thinks outside the bun? What is my stance? My stance is simple, sports fans. As a Christian, my priorities have changed. Throwing billions of dollars in finding a cure for a disease that to date has nothing? I would say better things you can send your money towards. Pacific is a firm believer that money is far wiser spent and invested in the proclamation and the promotion of, you guessed, this right here. God's Word, the Bible, the truth. Get a soul saved from his sins to have a proper relationship with Jesus Christ. We're all going to die anyway. I'm not minimizing. I'm not patronizing. And I'm not being insensitive to people who get a disease. But if I may say something, let's talk about breast cancer. Breast cancer is awful. Women like breasts. Let's call it what it is. Women like their breasts too. There's nothing more humiliating, more gut-grabbing than when a woman finds out she's got a lump. That's not cool. But why is there so much attention drawn to that and almost nothing drawn to with male cancers? Testicular cancer, stuff like that. Women get all the attention because it's right here. And we talk in our society, in our Western culture, women like to show those all the time. Well, not every single one, but a lot of women like men to notice them, and they like a lot of women to notice them too. That, for many women, is their prowess, the size of their breasts. And what's really sad is you go to cultures around the globe like the Philippines, Indonesia, where a lot of the women are more flat-chested, small-breasted, petite, and they feel very, very self-conscious. Almost every girl I dated in the Philippines, from the Philippines, living and working in Hong Kong, that had small breasts said, you know, my breasts aren't very big. I said, so what? Yeah, but you know, I see the white woman and they're so big. I said, you see the white woman who white corporate America has rammed in the cultures across the globe's face. We've taken American culture and dropped it in the middle of a Philippine freeway, Asian freeway, everywhere. You go down to Mexico, you go into South America, and you see Mexican soap operas, Spanish soap operas, and the tatas on those chicas are huge. And it is in your face. Me personally, not being crude, my channel's an open forum. I like small-breasted women. I like, perky nipples. I like dark brown areolas. I love Asian breasts. And I even like white women with smaller breasts, or any woman with smaller breasts, because when they're 50 years old, they still look great. I'm not caught up in big. I used to be, just like any normal red-blooded American male, but I look at them now, most of that is a lie. A bra does amazing things, but the first thing the bra does for most of us men is get us to believe that the breasts actually look like they're up here. Take off the shirt, take off the bra, and things start heading south real quick. I'm not here putting down women with big breasts. I'm not saying that. Every person needs to be satisfied with what God has endowed them or not endowed them with. Hard to do in this culture of media in your face, advertising, and media promotion of an image that a lot of the world cannot even measure up to. I told you about the Romanian singer Ina. Dark black hair, cute as ever, little mole right here. Her younger pictures, she's adorable. Then she gets huge breastplate. Clearly, anybody looking at her topless photos can tell you that she is not a natural. Nobody's breasts are perfectly shaped and conical and sticking out like that. And I ask myself, why do women do this? Why do Filipinas who come into money, the first thing they do is increase their breast size? Because of the media pressure. Because of the the huge demand placed on women that's where it's at. Women complain for a long time that men make sex objects out of women, but I always say, women, you're doing a good job of that yourself. Advertising yourself scantily, sleazily clad, you do it in public, you do it in private, you do it on the magazines that men see. One of the biggest sources, of temptation for the average American male for many years was going through the checkout aisle of any local grocery store. Mademoiselle, Elle, Cosmopolitan, People, Us, and any manner of sleazy tabloids like the Boston Globe, the National Enquirer, and a host of other ragtabs that can't tell the truth and say that UFOs found some human remains on Mars, and brought them back and set them on the Titanic. Okay. My thing on this is that doctors, it is medical science job to be proactive, to study viruses, to know their characteristics, traits, behavioral patterns, and what can eradicate them. We have Centers for Disease Control. We've got labs in the U.S. that house and store extremely deadly viruses under high intensive security and alarm systems and everything else. God forbid any fool get in there, get a hold of all those vials, and dump them in a metro. We would have pandemonium. But throwing billions, millions, and billions of dollars at finding a cure to me seems wasteful. People don't like to admit this, but there are some things that God said, no, you're not going to find the answer to this. How many of you have had a car or pickup and there was something wrong with it and you took it to the mechanic? And the mechanic fixed something on it. Says you're good to go. You drive it off the lot, you go to work the next morning, and you hear that same rattly dingy ding ding sound in it, and you go, hey, wait a minute, they didn't fix it. You go back and take it. Well, it could be this, and they find this. Pretty soon, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 later, you've replaced everything in your truck or car, and guess what? It's still running funny and doing weird things. You know what I've come to believe? Sometimes I think God just kind of says, I need you to stop ordering your little perfect world. Or conversely, how about if you own a truck for years and you don't do anything to it but put gas in it and check the oil and get an oil change once in a while? That's what happened to me. I drove that truck for years. Needed brakes, drums, shocks, struts, blah, 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 blah. So what about the times when God blessed me? Year after year, it ran like a top, started like a top, and drove like a dream. We don't always think about that. We can't even find a cure for the common cold. Now, many of my viewers are not Christians, and you may think I'm absolutely nuts for saying this, but bear with me. From a Christian perspective, I believe that a person's eternal destiny is more important than a healing in the ER, emergency room. That though we'd like everybody to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, reality is most of us will not be. Sadly, there's people dying all around the globe. We go to India and we go to places where there's some real problems, real medical issues, and we don't even think about them because we're so insulated over here. We're caught up in our materialistic, comfortable culture, and we're not exposed to such ravishing illnesses and diseases like others have witnessed when they've gone abroad. Why is there inordinate amount of attention drawn to breast cancer? Couple reasons. Men like breast. They don't want anything to happen to their wife's breast. And women, just as a guy likes to brag about the size of what's between his legs, A woman, I'm sorry, I don't care what woman out there, even small-breasted women, they like their breasts. That is a definition of their womanliness. There's nothing wrong with that. But how come women get all the attention with finding the cure? I don't mean to be rude, but I see all these find the cure Colorado pink license plates with the pink ribbon on it. You can pay more for the license plate, and it sports the cure for breast cancer. And I chuckle, and I want to say that woman needs to find the turn signal and find the speed limit and find courteous, lawful driving. And yeah, we're worried about finding the cure, but you've just endangered 20 people with your driving. Breast cancer usually doesn't kill somebody, but your driving could. I got a problem with that. People bandy about a cause, and everybody jumps on the bandwagon. And I've always said that pretty much whatever the world system is going go-go over, I think it's a good idea for Christians to exit stage right and get out of there. Taking your hard-earned money and throwing it at a hope so to find the cure is like pulling slot machines at a casino. Throw a couple bucks in, ding, ding, ding. Yes, I'm dating myself. I remember as a kid, my father had a love affair with Vegas Carson City, Reno, and we went into a casino, and they had the one-armed bandits. Ding, 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 ding. Wow, look at all that money falling in that tray. Incidentally, my dad would win $300 on a slot, and he'd all throw it back in there and end up losing $100 after $300 he won. I said, you know what? Here's my thing. If I was going to gamble, as soon as I won that $300, I'm out of the door, man. Out the door. Most people are so addicted to gambling, they throw it all back in hoping to win a bigger amount. It is an addiction, folks. Never did it. Never bought a scratch ticket, never bought a lotto card, never pulled a slot machine. I won't even play bingo for money. I won't do any of that. Or poker. Gosh, I remember going through Nevada. Excuse me. My dad would buy one of those poker Keno cards. And in the restaurant, there's a lit up board right there in the restaurant, and the old diners and everything. And you pick your numbers, and then the numbers screen lights up which one's won, and you're sitting there eating a meal, and somebody's just gambling away. Anyways, getting off on a rabbit trail. Watching what has happened with finding the cure. And my next question would be is, where's the accountability with where all this money's going to, and how much administration is involved, and how many execs are pulling down fat salaries off of this? We don't even think about that. Most people say, oh, I'm not giving money to church. I'm tired of them talking about tithing. And I hear that. I go, yeah, but you got no problem throwing $60,000 in an SUV, which is a complete liability the minute you drive it off the lot. You just lost several thousand on it. Most people will blow their disposable income on complete foolishness. But when it comes to tithing, everybody gets tight-fisted and says, oh, I'm not doing that. I watch people in their expensive SUVs will think they're doing a good act handing these panhandlers on the corner money, the same ones that are out there every day. I saw a sign the other day, lost my wife, lost my family, I've lost everything. Please help, God bless. I don't know how many of these people are lying, but I know Denver has a lot of them. And I ask, is it possible that these people cannot get a job? And I will tell you something that I don't think is fair about society. But before I talk about that, I want to say that as a Christian, we are under a different management. God promised to take care of us. There's some harsh realities out there that are enough to make all of us cringe. Could Pacific Ocean Asia be in the gutter in 24 hours? Yes. Do I believe God will let me go there? I don't know. The only verse I have to hang on to is David. I was young, now I'm old. I have never seen the righteous forsaken, or his descendants begging for bread. Forgive me. A little bit of the yawns today, but I still have stuff to talk about. Took a nice hot bath, so it kind of relaxed me all the way down. So, Tony's back from Ireland. Excuse me. Expect, Mr. Tony, to see some video footage or some pictures here thrown up on your channel, please. You can't just keep all that inside and hide it from us. I mean, I bared my whole Hong Kong story, complete with racy romance and everything, including pictures of every girl I dated, minus one. And you know what? I want to know about your trip, Mr. Ireland. We know the way society is. I look at some of these bedraggled people standing on a corner, and I know most places wouldn't hire them. And you talk about getting a job. How do you get a job when you don't have a place to live and you can't take a shower? Our society is pretty cruel. Our society is pretty harsh. You can work at Walmart full-time, stocking, putting stuff away for $9-something an hour. But tell me, viewers, Denver, Colorado, a one-bedroom apartment is $675 a month, plus deposit, plus utilities. That doesn't include your car, your gas, or your bus ticket, transportation, bus pass, and your phone. And then for all these people that got Comcast and cable and all the other junk that they've got, a person making $9 an hour, 40 hours a week is not going to be able to afford Denver rent for a one-bedroom apartment. Why is it that jobs that are extremely necessary to keep the businesses running don't get paid enough to make a livable wage? Black Friday's coming. People are talking about protesting at 1,600 Walmart locations to say we want better pay. There is a fine line in our society. People say, yeah, go get a job so I can feel good about myself. I work 40 hours a week and I still can't make enough to pay rent. And I got to live with 10 other roommates to pull it off. You know what's sad? Is I go back to the 80s and Pacific lived on his own. And I thought $250 a month was expensive. Oh, man. I would love to have an apartment for $250 a month now. And I mean anywhere in the country. With the wage I'm making. But it isn't like that anymore. $1,000 to replace a radiator, a fuel filter, and a water pump. I've had to go to the garage twice now. Couldn't see the radiator fluid when I opened the cap. I added half a bottle of my own Pre-Stone mix. I'm like, what? And I went down there and said, hey, and there's no leaks. Now, granted, there's burps in the system. Then yesterday, I checked my oil. And I want to say something to you guys. Normally, I check it the day after. I didn't. We had that cold snap. I didn't check it. I checked it at work yesterday on my break. The oil on my dipstick was 1 inch over the full mark. I'm like, oh, my word. And that was on the level. I called the place. It's Just Brakes. I said, hey, we got a problem. Well, can you bring it in? And I want to say, maybe you guys should tow it in, or maybe you guys should come and get it. Why do I got to keep coming back? I spent $1,000. But I'm nice. One thing I've learned is don't be rude to who's working on your car. Don't tell them off. You just don't do that. It's like taking off the waitress. You don't know what she's doing in that back room. There's your soup. And they've done that. I've heard stories from ex-waiters, waitresses, and when they've had bad people, the worst thing you can do is start getting sideways with a person serving your meal. I've had bad waitresses, snotty waitresses, and I haven't even done anything. I'm like, wow, these people are rude. And I've been with other people, and they said, wow, she's a jerk. I said, let's all be nice. I said, when we leave, we'll leave a penny on the table, and she'll get the message. Because we're acknowledging that we've tipped her, but she's only worth a cent. She'll get the message. I said, belly aching and complaining could cause her to go back and mess with our food. Yes, I've done that. I don't tolerate rudeness when you're a paying customer at a place. It just isn't right. So, back to what I was saying. We like to rabbit trail all over, but we come back to where we're going. There are people that have a hard time. And I cannot sit here and give a bad answer, say, just trust Jesus and everything will work out all right. Our church was advertising heavily the last 2 weeks. Today's game of the Air Force, Colorado Springs Air Force game, the big game that they have down on their campus. And it's cold down there right now. And it's funny, they said, oh, it's a great time for the men to have fellowship. And I thought, I found myself being cynical, and I thought, now how many men are sitting there talking about Jesus Christ during a football game? Now, I'm just being honest. And I thought, I don't know of too many men that talk about Jesus Christ during a football game. It is funny how in our culture, we've brought our culture into the church, and we now say that this could be a great opportunity for witness outreach and fellowship. And I'm going, boy, at the rate we're going, pretty soon we'll have an SUV for Jesus Club. Because everybody's into SUVs. We can all get together with each other's SUV and have a great time of fellowship. Wow, I really like your Dove bumper sticker on the back of your Jeep. Dude, that Holy Spirit descending like a Dove sticker on your Hummer is awesome. No. It doesn't work that way. I was in the store with the man of the house. I took him to Lowe's today so that he could get his building materials, and we used my truck since it's just a little pickup. The lady had 2 poodles in a shopping cart in Lowe's, and I'm thinking, why do people do this? Then the man of the house said, hey, are those on sale? And joked around and buy one, get one free, and she said, well, we didn't want to leave them in the car. Why didn't you just leave him at home? It's 0 degrees out there. People are strange. My belief is throwing money at a cure for Ebola seems not very sensible. Barack Obama sending troops to Africa to deal with this makes about as much sense to me as giving Sherpas Range Rovers to get up to Everest. It doesn't make sense. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, you can't get an SUV up Everest. A Sherpa can get up there, but a vehicle cannot. To date. I love these commercials to show these SUVs bounding along, and I thought, yep, you go take that thing out in the country and do that with it and watch how much stuff breaks on it. Unbelievable. Coming down University Boulevard in my bus yesterday, sunny. It was warming up a little bit. And I see a 1969 Jeep Wagoneer. The 2-door, not the 4-door, but like the old long station wagon style truck thing, or like the Jeep pickup except with the complete metal all the way to the back, topper type thing. His was a 2-door, no simulated wood grain, all metal, copper colored. He pulls up next to me at a traffic light. He had his passenger window down. I said, nice Jeep, dude. I said, that thing is in nice shape. He says, thanks. I said, what year? He says, 69. I said, wow. We get up to the next traffic light, and I said, they don't make them like that anymore. He was younger than me. He says, I got this thing for $4,500. He said, I wouldn't even want an SUV. I said, the SUVs are junk, and they're overpriced. He says, this thing's real steel. Look at the dash. I said, dude, I would have paid $4,500 for that. No rust, no dents, no dings, original chrome bumpers, nice treaded tires on them. The interior looked good. And I said, you got yourself a night. I said, take care of that baby. And all the cars around us watched us yak it up before the light turned green. But I looked at that and I thought, who's in the stupid department of design and new car technology? A bunch of geeks and nerds that don't have a clue? I'm sorry. I look at an International Scout. I look at the old C5 Chevy Blazers with the built-in roll bar inside. I'm like, those were cool. Metal glove box, metal dash, the flat dash with the round gauges. Yeah, they used to have oil pressure gauge, amps and volts and all kinds of goodies in there now. Now you got an idiot light. Well, remember in the 70s, 80s, and they came out with the idiot light. Yeah, you're an idiot because by the time that light goes, bzzz, you're already overheating. You don't have a gauge to monitor. Stupid. Reminds me of a scene out of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when the guys get the Chrysler LeBaron rent-a-car and the one guy throws a cigarette butt in the back and it isn't burned out and starts the whole car on fire. And the next day they get in, the whole convertible top is burnt and singed. The whole car is all blackened and burnt and crisped, and police pull them over. And do you have any reason why I'm pulling you over? My first thought is, yeah, because the car's all burnt up and doesn't look road safe. And the driver says, no. He says, well, you were speeding. Do you know how fast you were going? And the guy says, no, my speedometer's melted. I can't see it. I'm like, that's funny. I got roped into seeing that movie. There was a whole lot of cussing in there that I didn't like, but the movie was funny. There are more people showing up in the strangest of places. The Hispanic woman that said all these white, good-looking teachers, they're uppity. I'm talking to other people. I had a conversation with one of the tables that has been the target of some of the queen bee troublemaking women in there. They've gone around and told everybody, that table, they're trouble, they're bad, they're bad. I get along with everybody at that table. They've been there for years. They've all been nice to me. They've never crapped on me or anything, and I had a talk with them yesterday. All of them are Hispanic except one. And I was shocked when one said, have you noticed in the back offices that not one white person works back there other than the route manager? I said, yeah, I've noticed that. I said, for the first time in my life, I'm starting to say I'm the wrong color in this place. And they said, no, we're seeing that. They're hiring the blacks and the Hispanics. Other people are seeing this. Other people are seeing the things I talk about in my videos. And the nice thing is, I'm not talking out of my butt. What I'm seeing is real. What I'm hearing, what I'm observing is bang on. There was a 67 Volkswagen Bug for sale down at the Auto Pond down the road here. I was going to go in and look at it. I was talking to a lady at church last Sunday about it. She goes, oh, are you talking about that purple one? I said, yeah, that really cool one. She goes, yeah, my husband went and looked at it. They wanted $6,000 for it. I'm like, of course. Do you remember the days when those things were $500? I wish I'd have gone back and bought a whole bunch of that old stuff for next to nothing, stored it in a nice garage and with humidity in there to keep everything nice and supple in the seals. And wow, I'd be sitting on a gold mine right now. We're watching our culture just shred itself right before our very eyes. I'm sorry, in 25 years, nobody's going to say, wow, I really like that Nissan Murano. Or your Kia Sophia. I'm going to tell you a little story. And I'm going to include the video in the link. I hope you all, women and men, are disciplined to watch this. You'll find it interesting, even if you're not into the sea and ships. It's a big, big part of history. It is the history of the United States of America because at the turn of the century and all the way up into the 40s and 50s, the vast bulk of this nation came over to this country via the transatlantic ocean liners. The immigrants, Ellis Island, New York with their pizzerias, those people came over on the big seagoing giants. Names like the Leviathan, the Olympic, well, the Titanic never made it to New York, the Andrea Doria, the Queen Mary, the Queen Elizabeth, the Britannic, the Bremerhaven, the Rotterdam, the Ile-de-France, the Berengaria. Big, giant ships. Did you know that the France, that was done either the 50s or the 60s, was the longest ship ever built in its day, over 1,000 feet, longer than the Queen's, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth. It had dog-eared smokestacks. It had these flat things that stuck out. It was to keep the soot from falling down on the decks. It wasn't until the late 50s that the United States came along, the SS United States. It did a whopping 45 knots. That's over 50 miles an hour. And they said at the time that this ship was doing that, it was going faster than the cars were going on our nation's highways back in the 50s. Can you imagine something over 990 feet long sluicing through the Atlantic at 50 miles an hour? I'm sorry, I get into that because that's power. I look at our generation of people today and how cheap and sleazy they are, and they buy these little stupid rice rocket cars and think that's power, and I'm going, you know what? Power from what? From a red light to another red light? I'm talking horsepower and boiler systems and engines that were stories high. Titanic had 29 boilers, 156 furnaces, triple screw, 3 propellers, and engines that were several story building high. Pistons that went, I mean, we're talking massive. Check out the Normandy. The Normandy had some of the hugest equipment on it. This stuff was built on a Titanic scale. And these hauled the nations of Europe, their elite, the hobnobs, the well-to-dos, the Astoria, the Guggenheims, the Strauss, which owned the famous Macy's department store in New York City. Both of them went down with the Titanic. John Jacob Astor was connected with the very profitable fur trade, the French involvement with Canada and down into the top of Minnesota and the northern U.S. with the mink and all the other pelt industry. But what we don't hear a lot about with those massive, grandiose, opulent luxury liners of their day, that the bulk of the fare-paying passengers were what was called steerage, immigrants, third class. These areas of the ship were gated off so that they could not get into second and first class at all. The first time any of them had a glimpse of first class living is when they came pouring out of the bowels of the Titanic, when they finally busted down a gate because the stewards would not let them up. We romanticize the Titanic, but the stewards and the crew kept them down there and wouldn't open the gates. Finally, somebody had had enough and busted the gate down, and they came pouring up and went running through the first-class dining room, and were just like shocked beyond words. They'd never even seen stuff like this. They didn't have television in 1912, so they didn't even have a window to that world. As they were running for their lives from the below decks, many of them paused as they went through the first-class rooms to get to the boat deck, and were just appalled. at the luxury. There's not a lot to be praised about the Titanic. There were a few rich people that said, "We're prepared to go down like gentlemen." They still had chivalry even among the rich snobs of the day. One woman told her husband, "If you're not going with me, I'm not getting into the lifeboat." She put her arm around him and went down with her man. Wow, what woman would go down with her man in America today, not even on a ship? The lessons, the symbolism of an era that has gone away. Pacific Ocean Asia knows a tremendous amount about the history of the transatlantic liners. The Leviathan was making a North Atlantic crossing, ship at about 800 and some odd feet long, belt as big as the Titanic, big German ship. Cruising through the North Atlantic, a wave hits it broadside and cracks its hull right clean through into the inner rooms. That's how powerful the storms were, with inch-plus thick steel plates riveted so tightly together. These were floating towns. Towns in the U.S. that I lived in. Mammoth Lakes, 2,500 people. Titanic had 2,206 passengers. 1,503 died. 704 survived. 2,207, somewhere in there. That's an entire U.S. town, small town. 1,500 people. There's many towns in the U.S. with 1,500 people. Can you imagine a ship that big sinking? And that big, massive piece of brand new machinery, the most luxurious of its day, disappears beneath that Atlantic freezing cold starry night, April 15th, 2:20 a.m., as its stern section was pointing like a diving duck's butt straight towards the heavens and gathering speed and going down, bubbles and froth and stuff floating to the surface, and all of a sudden that noise is gone, and you hear 1,500 souls screaming and wailing in that cold Atlantic. And then suddenly, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you hear nothing. The arrogance to send out a ship of that size, say we don't need lifeboats. The Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. Hit the iceberg at 11:40 p.m., April 14th. It sank at 2:20 a.m., April 15th. If they had enough lifeboats, not one soul would have been lost. The reason for that decision? She was touted as unsinkable. Some wag said God himself cannot sink this ship. Isn't it amazing how trite man can be? Let's switch to the Normandy. All of us have heard of the Titanic. Many of you saw the movie with the silly little tryst with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. That part ruined the show. I know a lot of women thought, oh, isn't that cute? It was pathetic. It was classless. When Kate Winslet hawked up a loogie and went over the deck of the ship, that to me was utterly disgusting from a historical standpoint. But let's talk about Molly Brown. Molly Brown was on that ship. This is Molly Brown country. Her father made big money in the mining industry. She was Denver's millionairess. Her husband did mining up in had something to do with the mines in Leadville, Colorado, which is a town of 10,000 feet, the highest livable town in the U.S. to my knowledge. If you go down to Wadsworth and Yale, a few miles from my place here, Molly Brown's summer house still stands on the corner. If you go downtown, In Capitol Hill, Molly Brown's brownstone house still stands. It is the Molly Brown House Museum. Molly Brown was typical of a lot of the Colorado women are today. She was brash, she spoke her mind, and she didn't play the little game, which I admire that fact of her. She didn't play the little butt kiss, hobnob, keep up with the Joneses game. She was who she was, and if the British elites and the other hobnob snobs didn't accept her, oh well. Her classic statement as she's floating adrift in a lifeboat on that North Atlantic night, and the greatest liner of all time is meeting its final demise. She said, I forgot the dollar amount, but I'm going to throw it out. Pay 2,000 pounds to go on a ship only to have a damn hole poked in her. Classic Brown. La Normandie, the French flagship, superb. Art Deco throughout, Lalique glass fixtures, architectural design and beauty inside that rivaled nothing else. Indoor theater, shuffleboard courts, funnels so big that 3 locomotives could pass side by side inside of them. A tennis court between the funnels. Normandie burned and sank in New York Harbor in the Hudson when it was being converted as a troop ship renamed SS Lafayette. French was getting their butts wiped by Adolf Hitler. I don't remember if they gave us the ship or we seized it, but we took it. We're going to put it into service, and acetylene torch was left on, started a bale of hay on fire, and it sent that whole beautiful ship in flames. They pumped so much water into that. Those ships had so much rich woodwork in them that they burned hotter than anything, that steel I-beams and steel deck plates and rivets popped and deck plates sank and sagged. Portholes blew out. They pumped so much water into it, it turned over on its side, and they scrapped it right there. Much of the debris from the Normandy was hauled out on garbage scows into New York Harbor, which they did for eons. They dumped their trash into the sea. I'm going to tell you a story that's a little bit sappy to some of my viewers, but it meant something to me. Pacific Ocean Asia was adopted out of Long Beach, California. I was born in 1966. My grandfather, not blood related, the family that adopted me, my grandfather was a merchant seaman, merchant marine seaman, through World War II, through the Korean War, and into Vietnam. He has diaries that I have in Washington, some excerpts, where he's on the ship in Manila and different places, and he would say good night to all the family members, and my name was in there. His wife, my grandmother, worked in the city of Long Beach, in the City of Long Beach building. It was a high-rise. In 1967, because of the advent of the jet age and the invention of the 747 that could carry a large number of passengers in a matter of hours across the Atlantic versus 4 to 5 days of a transatlantic crossing, the death knell was finally sounded for the ocean-going giants. The United States was losing $3 million a year. The Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth had more crew than passengers on their voyages. The decision was made to lay up these giants. The SS United States went to Norfolk, Virginia, where it sat and basically rotted for years. And only in the 90s, it sold for $2.6 million to NCL, Norwegian Cruise Line, or Caribbean Cruise Lines. They decided not to do anything with it. It was sent to Turkey, towed to Turkey, gutted of its asbestos and everything, brought back to Philadelphia and sat. Last I heard, it was going to go to the scrapyard because they couldn't afford the something like $50,000 a month docking fees. I do not know what the status of that ship is. There have been people raising money to keep this relic alive. The SS United States is a story. And it's a story that is sad because it was a symbol of how the U.S. stayed out of the whole transatlantic market. They had a few tiny little ships, the Independence, the Constitution. They had seized other ships. They seized the Leviathan in World War I and renamed it the Berengaria. They seized it from the Germans. But the U.S. was not interested in running the transatlantic trade. But with World War II coming to an end, somebody got a bee in their bonnet and said, look, let's make the best passenger liner we ever had that could be converted in 24 hours over to a troop ship if need be. Designer Mr. Gibbs got to the drawing boards and built one of the most fabulous, technologically oriented ocean liners ever. The SS United States, with the most powerful power plant to propel it through the waves of the Atlantic. The SS United States was not luxurious as the Normandy, the Queen Mary, the Queen Elizabeth, the Titanic, the Vaterland, the Leviathan, any of those. But it had stealth, and it appealed to the American jet set. It was novelty for the Americans to get on it, and many dignitaries from both sides of the Atlantic boarded and rowed her back and forth. My uncle told me a few years ago that he got to ride on the United States when it was brand new, and it was going to go up the Chesapeake. He said, Pacific, I couldn't believe this thing. It was incredible. He walked through some of the rooms, he stood on the deck, and he said this was a beautiful ship. The paint peeling off of the ship sitting there gutted of everything except its original engines. The engines were never opened up in full. Nobody knows what it could do. The speed record for a transatlantic liner was set by that and never beat again. The SS United States still holds it to this day. Why does Pacific talk about this? That ship was red, white, and blue. And it proved that if the U.S. wanted to do something bad enough, they did it. And they blew the doors off the competition. No, they didn't do it in luxury. People had an affectionate warmth for the queens. The Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth, but more so the Queen Mary, had a rich, warm, inviting, cozy interior. The SS United States was so fireproof that everything was made of spun glass, metals, and aluminum, and though it was cool for its day, it was a rather sterile boat. Things were a-changing. The jets ran them under. And as the U.S. continues to corrode and become more and more corrupt, sitting in Philadelphia is a relic of a once great nation that is also corroding right out from under itself. I secretly had hoped that somebody would buy it, restore the pride of the flagship of the SS United States, and then I thought, but why? Millions of dollars would be needed to refurbish and get that thing going. The Queen Mary, it was decided, would be sold to the city of Long Beach. She would sail for last time from England under its last commanding skipper. And the ship was so big it couldn't fit through the Panama Canal. It went all the way around Tierra del Fuego, the bottom of South America, which is some of the roughest ocean in the world. That is the strait between Antarctica and South America, Tierra del Fuego. Rough ocean. Same thing with the bottom of Africa. That's called the Roaring Forties in there. Very dangerous down in those southern oceans. It made an epic and historical voyage, and as it wound its way all the way back up, sailing in what was to become the ocean that Pacific was born on the edge of, the great and mighty Pacific Ocean. The Queen Mary put its helm over, finished with engines at last, at its new home in Long Beach in 1967, 1 year after Pacific was born. The same year that my grandmother, who worked for the city of Long Beach, and her husband sat on the roof of the city of Long Beach building and watched her steam in. It was quite an event. If only I had been old enough to have seen that. There's a sad story that the two ships, the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, passed each other for one last time. And many people that were on the ships had no idea of the significance of this moment. It's written about in a book by John Malcolm Brennan, Beau Voyage, a big coffee table book about that thick that I have in my collection of things. It's one of the most beautiful black and white photos, complete private collection photos that you won't find in other books. On the interiors and exteriors of some of the most beautiful ocean liners ever. John Malcolm Brennan had a love affair with the ocean. He rode the Queen several times. On this voyage, as these ships passed, the skippers of each got out on the wing bridge, doffed their hat, and they both did a blast of the foghorns. Many of my viewers might go, why would you get choked up over that, Pacific? Because Pacific has a love for that. There's more than just a ship. It was a way of life. It was a culture. It was what birthed our nation and brought in a huge amount of immigrants. And nobody seemed to mind back then. Immigration is a loaded word today, and it's different today because they're coming in from south of the border and bringing in all their ticky-tacky ghetto culture and their language and wanting to dominate and take over us all. The immigrants that came to America got busy and didn't beg on the system, didn't get on welfare. There was no welfare, and they started pizzerias, and they started shoe shine businesses, and they started things, and they built themselves a life. Maharani sent me the Tinikling dance of the Philippines. It's where the girls take the bamboo poles, and they go and the girls dance and step in between them, and they got to step out of the way before they close in on their ankles. She said to me that because of our pop media culture, our internet, everything, that all this stuff is starting to disappear. I'm going to say something, but first, I'm a little shy of people seeing me choke up, so I'm going to be a little bit muted in the dark. Reading the account of an eyewitness who was on the Queen Mary when this event happened of the passing of the Queen Elizabeth going in opposite directions. And the blast of I would have lost it. John Malcolm Brennan said it was the end of an era. Men with big cigars, men with ties, men hobnobbing with all of its arrogance, with all of its humility, with all of its everything, symbolized a world coming into existence with America becoming bigger and powerful because of immigrants moving and being responsible and starting businesses. And New York City was its own culture within a culture within a culture. You had Little Italy, you had the Jewish, you had all the different European nations right within its cities. And unfortunately, there was some feistiness among the groups that if you stepped into somebody else's neighborhood, you could get your block socked. I'm a little too patriotic, but I'm also a little bit sappy in that I like nostalgia, a good magazine to read for many of my viewers that are in their 40s. Don't laugh. To really give you an appreciation for the people much older than us, read Reminisce magazine. You can find it online. You can order it. There's stories, there's pictures, there's recounts of people and the way life used to be. When Grandpa bought his first Model T. Stuff like that. When the ocean liners came to an end, the term jet set was coined with the new millionaires, and the millionaires that didn't want to take 5 days to get across the Atlantic. They had the money, so they paid to ride the planes. But when the rates came down and the 747s were produced, and they realized working class people could now afford to fly, they said, why would I go by ship? And all of a sudden, the North Atlantic became pretty empty. America is built. It is built on immigration. It is built on what those seagoing giants brought to this country. Not a bunch of ghetto people bringing their rap crap music. Not people who created car theft San Andreas. Not people who brought porn. Not people who brought our trailer trash Jerry Springer culture, but people who thought they could find a better way of life and have a chance to earn more money and live with a little more higher standard of living than they did in the European cultures of their day. People that hustled and bustled and came to Ellis Island in fear as they were checked for lice and checked for this and made sure that they could pass so that they could go over to New York and start their life. People that didn't quibble about saying we want to speak Hungarian or Polish only. People that knew this is America, we need to learn English. Viewers, do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. Educate yourself and watch this BBC classic video on the last great liners. Watch it in its entirety and don't fall asleep. You'll see real life footage of people and passengers and interviews and talking of those ships, about the ships, the way it was on those ships, and listen to what people say. Just the service, the food service on that ship was a small town buzzing with activity, with chefs and waiters and maitre d's and all the stuff that went on. And then it talks about the advent of the cruise industry and the very thing that ran the transatlantic liners into their docks permanently. The airplanes now had a booming business of transporting passengers from Middle America and all around the world to ports of call to get on their cruise. It talks about the difference between a liner, an ocean liner, and a cruise ship, which I found very interesting. The modern cruise ship today is not made to cross the mighty Atlantic. They can portage around the Caribbean and stuff like that. Pay attention to that. These cruise ships are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and if they ever run into a serious storm, they could be tipped over. The amount of people they're hauling, 8,000 to 10,000, counting crew. Excuse me. Lots of change. Today's cruise ship is nothing but a Disneyland and a Mall of America and a casino and a Broadway show at sea, except not really Broadway quality. I love the old ships. Their theaters, their dining salons, their first-class accommodations. I'd love to go down in the boiler room of one of those behemoths and see those people down there. The people that the rich never even paid attention to. The boiler stokers. The guys that were called the Black Gang, and it wasn't because they were Negro. They were covered in coal dust, and they shoveled coal on these mammoth liners, keeping those boilers hot as can be, to propel those ships across the ocean. One gentleman survived the sinking of the Titanic as a boiler stoker in 1912. In 1914, he survived the sinking of the Empress of Ireland on the St. Lawrence River between the U.S. and Canada as a boiler stoker. In 1915, he was on the Lusitania May 7th, 8 miles off the old head of Kinsale, Ireland, when Captain Walter Schweiger ordered the command to fire a torpedo midships at the Lucy, blowing up the inner rooms of the engine room, and the ship sank in 18 minutes. That boiler stoker survived that one as well. Some of you ladies might go, why would this interest me? Watch the documentary and look at the fashion of the day. Look at the interior of these ships. Then you'll be interested. Women are interested in people-related things. Men are interested in facts and figures and size and strength and power. Women pay attention to the people, pay attention to the culture and the way of life. Pay attention to the fact that with that era closing, we lost something. Do you know that 5 days crossing the Atlantic, people got to know people? People talked to people. People sat out on deck chairs. And you look at our society today, you get on a plane and a lot of times your seatmate doesn't even want to look at you. They're too busy doing this. Now I'm going to tell you a story that is very ironic. I told you about the Queen Mary. It sailed into the town that I was adopted from, Long Beach. It sits there to this day. It's over 70 years old. Queen Mary still has a life as a museum, a hotel, and a convention center. People are fascinated with this thing. You go up onto the bridge of the ship and all those brass telegraphs with the slow ahead, full ahead, reverse. It was a simple bridge. Today's cruise ship looks like the inside of a space station. And to think that a captain by the name of Commodore James Bissett, I read his book in Duluth. There's one advantage about living alone and single in Duluth in my 20s. It was too cold to go play, which I still would go out and run around in a blizzard because I was a foolish person who loved it then. Can't remember the name of his book. I should Google search it. True story about a guy that worked on wooden sailing ships and then moved from those as a young man to the steel-hulled steamers. And he, with no college, no technical anything, back in the days when life was simpler, he single-handedly worked his way all the way up to the Carpathia. April 14th, 1912. Radio Marconi wireless operator comes out of the radio room on Carpathia and says, "The Titanic is sinking." Captain says, "Are you sure?" "Yes." Oh my gosh. The reputation of the Titanic was well known for a new ship. The biggest, most luxurious, opulent liner. Now bad news. James Bissett was an officer on the bridge that night, and he recalls in his own account an account that I'd never read in any other documentary or book or read about the Titanic. I was like, ooh, this is new and a whole angle of the story I never, ever saw. The windows of the bridge frosted and ice-covered on that North Atlantic night. He remembers the crew taking the dining room, moving tables, getting out blankets, moving things out of the way, and there was commotion all over the ship. And they said, if the passengers ask, don't cause them to panic. Just tell them we're making preparations, that everything is fine. They put that ship, that old Carpathia, in full tilt mode for its small size and dodging ice all the way. And then in the distance, through the night, they see something. As dawn started breaking across the North Atlantic frozen sky, they see the first lifeboat. Captain says, off with engines. Have her stand by. We'll have the boats come to us. 704 cold, weeping, traumatized people that have lost their husbands, their babies, their loved ones, climbing a rope ladder from a lifeboat to get on the only ship that saved them all. James Bissett was there to witness the whole scene. James Bissett continued to work his way on up and ended up becoming the commander of the Queen Mary, the captain. One of the reasons Pacific can be down about things in this day and age and a little bit cynical is because I've had the privilege of doing a lot of reading in my days. James Bissett didn't sit on a laptop. He didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have Netflix. He didn't even know what a Samsung was. He didn't have an easy life. He worked his way from ship to ship to ship. No college. No public education outside of school. In his growing up years. To become captain of one of the most legendary ships of all time. The Queen Mary. I wish life was like that today. With corporate people literally doing their own form of ethnic cleansing, if you will, by erecting a wall so damn high that the rest of us can't scale it. Contrasted with a time when somebody who showed the wherewithal, the vicissitude, and the willingness to try could become the commander and captain of the greatest ship of its day. Life was different back then. You young people got a bad hand of cards dealt with you. Trust me. Everything's technical. Everything is college. Everything's a degree. Everything's litigious. Everything is bureaucracy. It wasn't like that in his day. This is not a boring documentary of ocean liners. This is a documentary. And the stuff that I'm telling you, some of this is not in that. You'll have to do your own reading and research. I've got this from many, many, many things over the years. The love of the sea, the opulence of these majestic ships captivated me from one very book. In junior high, I was on a bent for reading all these horror stories. Remember the towering inferno? The LA skyscraper bursts into flames. By the way, the Poseidon Adventure, the Queen Mary was used as the backdrop of that. Pacific picked up a copy of A Night to Remember by Walter Lord. I had a fascination with disasters in the 80s because we went through the 1980 earthquakes in Mammoth. Mount St. Helens went off a week before disaster was ever in the air. This was my culture. The Cold War. My friends and I used to talk in Jimmy's A-frame house in a section of town where he's surrounded by pine trees, and his mother wasn't home, and we'd talk about Russia. And I remember him telling something that made me chill all the way inside, that it's so sophisticated now, they could push the button and blow us up, and we could push the button and blow them up. And I said, you're joking me, right? No. That scared me. But God used that. He used my fear of disasters and gave me a fascination with them. And that ultimately pushed me to realize, man, I could die someday. Then what? That pushed me to question, to search, to look. And I'm a Christian now because of that also. My fear of death is gone. I talk a lot of negativity on my channel. And it's not so much that I'm being negative. I'm just reporting what I'm seeing. People don't like hearing this stuff. They'd rather listen to the evening news, which is causing people to fear. I'm not causing people to fear. I'm giving people hope by talking about stuff that a lot of people were like, oh, I thought I was the only one that saw this. No, you're not. I try to inject my experiences, my loves, my disdains, everything into this, and I bring to you and submit to you, my viewers, my love of the sea and the seagoing giants that are no more. Because there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in that history. It wasn't just a boat that a bunch of people got on and went to the other side. Those boats carried the backbone of what makes up and made up America. Those immigrants that came over helped to build our streets and roads and power poles and power lights and infrastructure and sewer systems and everything. This goes beyond a simple boat ride. You look at the old black and white pictures of any of the French ships. The stewards were dressed to the nines, and they handed you a copy of a French magazine as you opened your stateroom door. Good morning, sir. What a life. That if you were privileged and you had money, you could go on an ocean liner and forget your troubles for 5 days and enjoy good food, beautiful orchestral music, in an opulent setting, and all this while looking out a window at a beautiful ocean. Today they want casinos. Today they have Bally Fitness on a cruise ship. I just can't get that. In my bus, I go down Walnut Street in downtown Denver in the morning. There's a fitness club right on the center, and there's a woman with her iPod on, staring out the window towards my bus, running in one position, and I'm going, why do people pay for these? They don't want to run outside anymore. That's not sterile. That's not safe. Back then, if somebody wanted to run, they jogged the lifeboat deck. A couple times around, made a mile easily, or a few times. I think one of the ships, they touted it that one circuit around the deck was close to a quarter of a mile. That's impressive. But for me, you can have casinos. You can have the all night, all you can eat buffets. You can have the geisha girls jumping on the stage and all the craziness. All I want is a portal in my cabin that when I open it, I can hear the surf hitting the side of the hull and smell that salt air. And when I go on deck and lean over that rail and see that moon and see the wake behind that massive liner, my fun meter's pegged all the way to high. To look up and see these towering funnels with big black belching smoke that all the environmentalists today would just have a coronary over. Yes, that was the way things were back then. Everything was coal-fired. It wasn't concerned with political correctness. It wasn't concerned and caught up in making everybody afraid of every little thing that can kill us. To that I say, and what is your point? Put your life in Jesus Christ, and if you gotta die, you go home to your eternal home. Even my grandpa told me something profound as a child that I never forgot. There is no such thing as an atheist on a ship in a typhoon. All of a sudden, everybody finds the ability, rises up quite naturally. Oh, God help us when that ship is going like this. There is a helicopter view of the Queen Mary going through very rough seas. I've stood on that ship. I've walked on that ship many times. I've been on it 4 times. When you stand on the bow of that thing, it is impressive. Those big anchor chains, those big windlasses, the rails, the cargo hold doors, and you go up into the prow of that ship, and then you get up on the bridge and look out over that huge length of bow. I'm sorry, to me, that's powerful. To me, that's cool. For me to hold the wheel of something like that and go, this is my command. Forget rocket ships. Forget Cummins diesels. Forget some rice rocket dweebs down on Colfax dragging each other in the middle of the night and wrapping around a phone pole. Yeah, you're not going to see the Queen Mary do 0 to 60 in 0.5 seconds. But you're not going to see a rice rocket cross the Atlantic either. The power plant that drives something that big. To look out over the stern of something like that and see this massive wake. That's power. To know that there's every strata, cultural, socio-economic group realized within that ship. Surrounded by steel, housing all kinds of people from the dignitary hobnob aristocrats to the poor immigrants dreaming for a better life once they get to the shore on the other side. I consider that quite fascinating. Watch the video and look at the size of these things. Look at the size of the propellers on these things. And don't forget to factor in that these ships also had desalinization plants to give the customers fresh water. Dynamos that ran the electrical system through the whole ship. I'll bet you if all those people were alive today, and many of them are, I bet you if you were to ask them, did you miss not having a laptop, a cell phone, Facebook? They'd laugh at you. How many times have you heard the old people say, those were the days? There was a reason they said that. Their dancing wasn't this stuff. Everything about their way back then. Yes, they had problems in the olden days. Yes, they had perverts and problems and this and that. But you talk to anybody that goes back to the old days, and a lot of them will tell you, yeah, we had it hard then, but I wouldn't trade it for nothing. We're a thankless, spoiled, rotten, in-your-face, self-serving culture today. Now, I've deliberately held you off for my grand finale. I've deliberately rabbit trailed to whet your appetite, to pique your curiosity, hopefully to get you to watch the video included in the link. It's important to me. I hope it would become something of a touchstone with you, my viewers, male and female, black, white, Asian, anybody. For you Asians across the ocean, this might interest you too. It is informative. BBC always does outstanding documentaries. They're not boring at all. 2008, Pacific made a mistake of the heart. He pursued a girl over and against another girl when two women showed up online at the same time, Alisti Oningsi and Beth. Listi was a Muslim, and I immediately said in my mind, in Hibbing, Minnesota in the library, she's a Muslim? No way. She wrote me. Beth did not. Beth looked at my profile, and I went after her because I saw that she wanted a man who was close to God. That got me. Listi wrote me a passionate letter saying, I've never seen anybody's profile like this. I see so many Western men, and they're awful, they're arrogant, they're rude. And I wrote her and I said, thank you for your beautiful letter. You're a very pretty girl, but I'm a Christian. Yeah, I know, I saw that. We kept in touch for a year. When I came back from Hong Kong and I told her what happened after the first visit, she said, you know, I could kick that girl. You know, Michael, if you came to Indonesia where I'm at, I would have fixed you dinner. I would have massaged your back. I would have just done everything for you. And I said, wow. She goes, I'm not looking for a ride to your country. I don't even want to go there. Viewers, I struggle because the Bible says, do not be unequally yoked. So I didn't pursue her. Instead, I kept going after Beth. Now, don't miss something. Beth is not her real name. I'm not going to tell you her full name, but her real name was Lourdes. Her dad was drunk when he named her after her birth. Her mother was upset. Her mother wanted to name her Elizabeth. It is interesting, when I met Beth online, she was from the Philippines but living and working in Hong Kong. At the same time I met Beth, I had a resurge of interest in my ocean liner love hobby and was reading up on the fate of the Queen Elizabeth. The fate of the Queen Elizabeth was shocking. Queen Mary was sold to the city of Long Beach, completed a successful epic voyage around the Horn of South America to become a museum. The Queen Elizabeth was bought by C.Y., and I forget his last name. He was a Chinese man, and he was going to turn it into the C.Y.'s University, S-E-A-W-I-S-E, a play on his initials C.Y. C.Y. Young or something. It was anchored off of Hong Kong, and while it was undergoing a refit and a refurbish, saboteurs came onto the ship and set it on fire at many different points, deliberately, most likely Chinese. The ship burned so blasted hot, and again, same mistake made of the Normandy and the Hudson River in the 1940s in New York. The ship turned over and sank. The fire was so intense that hull plating completely melted and bowed and buckled. British were appalled. You'll think I'm crazy for what I'm about to say, but people actually had a love and an affection towards their ships. They knew they were inanimate objects, but they knew that each ship had its own personality and inviting warmth to beckon them to come and voyage on them again and again and again. Businessmen who went back and forth. And women. Watching the Queen Elizabeth go up in flames, sinking in Asia, was more than the Queen Elizabeth's fans could bear. Sections of the engine room of the Queen Elizabeth still stand where they are today, but now they're buried under dirt of what is now the new Lantau Airport. The Queen Mary still sails on in Long Beach, which is where I'm from. The Queen Elizabeth met her demise in Hong Kong. The Queen Elizabeth, the name Elizabeth, was the name Beth's mother wanted for her. And when I was fascinated and obsessed with Beth, I shared with her that story, and it went right over her head. I said, there's some cool symbolism here. I was born in Long Beach, and my favorite ship is docked there. A year after I was born. Your Elizabeth originally, and the sister ship of that met its end there. Not to read anything into this, I just thought it was ironic that the relationship ended in flames in Hong Kong. I am a deep person. I have a painting of the Queen Mary that I put on my screensaver sometimes. It shows it looking bigger than it is. The lighting is just right. The way the artist painted it is legendary. It's absolutely magnificent. Pacific, because of his insecurities, on the one hand, and because of my love for the big ships on the other, I learned something at a very young age. People are very mean and cruel. So when I'd walk in the Minnesota winters, and I'd walk anywhere, the way I dealt with not looking people in the eye and was to think like I was on the big ship. And I taught myself a little trick. When you look out across that big massive bow of the Queen Mary. Don't look at all these little boats next to you. Look out across that bow in front of you. Look right past them all. Because that's what you got to get through the ocean. It sounds silly, but it was my defense. And it made me smile. I'm on the bridge of my ship. In 1985, the ultimate master took control of me. But I'm not an easy ship to command. God has his work cut out for him. The ship came to symbolize the way life is. That beautiful black hull with the portholes and the windows on the white gleaming superstructure and those massive towering funnels seen from the distance, the light coming from all those glass panes and portholes was beautiful, warm, inviting. But yet that black hull was the only defense against a cold, unforgiving, unmerciful Atlantic Ocean. Inside me is a lot of warmth. Outside is a cold, angry sea. I have tried to reach Beth several times. And when I say several, we're talking hundreds since 2012. No phone number to reach her. I don't know. Talked to my friend in Florida the other day who married her best friend. They were best friends in Singapore and friends for 20 years. Beth and this friend are still now back to talking again. According to her, she's still in Hong Kong with the same employer. As far as I'm concerned, the Queen Elizabeth burned up and sank. And it's easy for people who are my detractors and naysayers to go, you're an idiot. You went over there, you saw the red flags. I'm not even going to begin to try to explain to you the deficiencies within myself as to why I continue to throw myself at that. I don't need to. Many of us do things. Many. Just some aren't noticed. Most of you, my viewers, will never get onto YouTube and talk about your dirty laundry, your mistakes, and your embarrassing moments. I don't blame you. But Pacific is like a transatlantic liner. I'm sailing a cold sea, and I have to continue to survive. You think I don't know there's not U-boats all around with their periscope aimed right at me going, ooh, fire torpedo right at the middle of that thing. Of course. But when you factor into the fact that God's got my life in my hand, I keep sailing this massive sitting target called an ocean liner. My life. And if he wants me to get torpedoed, then there's not much I can do about it. I hope you will learn something from the video and find it interesting. Not dry, not boring. It isn't dry. You'll see footage of the Elizabeth burning. You'll see footage of the Normandy. Well, no, I don't think the Normandy made it in there. These are the last ships of the last age. The cruise ship age is a selfish age. It's, look at what we're going to do to entertain the stuff out of you. The transatlantic liners were a way of life. It was a culture. It was a, okay, whatever I'm doing in London is going to come on hold for 5 days because I'm going to New York. No cell phones, no pagers, no fax machines, no laptops. You're at the mercy of a captain and a creation that God made in a technological marvel called a ship that after the Titanic people learned, hey, this thing could also sink. Watch the video, please. You will enjoy it. I grabbed on the Queen Mary because even though it's not sailing the ocean, it is floating on its own. It is not cemented in, it's floating. But it's still being used. It still lives. I pray that as long as God wants me here, that I'll be lived and used for Him for something good. Oh, I'd much rather sail those seas. I'd much rather see the spray splash the bridge windows and me standing at the wheel. But maybe I am in a symbolic way. I don't know. It's often been said by my cousin, I don't get this. You're not blood family, and yet you have more in common with Papa than anybody in the family. It's almost like you caught his saltwater fever. And I said, yep. And it's too bad he isn't alive now as a 48-year-old man where I could have those conversations and really pick his brain about his sea travels. If I'd have taken the time to Google, I think his name was Horatio Spafford. The ocean liner isn't just some trite piece of boring, dry history. The ocean liner has inspired a lot more than any of you will ever know in this modern age. John Malcolm Brennan is a young boy who grew up. He used to run along the waterfront in New York, and he couldn't wait to see these big, massive liners coming into berth. While other kids were reading comics and Batman and this and that, he was going down and watching these big seagoing giants docking, passengers getting off, a flurry of activity to prepare it for its voyage out. I believe it was Horatio Spafford. I cannot remember which ship it was, but it was a transatlantic liner, a smaller one. It was hit by another ship in a dense fog somewhere out in the Atlantic. Long time ago. His wife and children were on it. He was not. They drowned. They perished with the sinking of the ship. Horatio went back, I don't remember if it was to America or England, to attend the funeral on another liner. And he asked the captain if the captain could please stop at the longitude and latitude of where his wife's steamship had sank. The captain, being a kind man, obliged him and says yes, but only momentarily. Horatio Spafford walked up to the deck, walked over the rail, and looked out at the sea. After the ship's engines resumed, he went down to his stateroom, shut the door, penned the words of an infamous hymn that you all as Christians should know. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when storm clouds like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, even so, it is well with my soul. True story. There's an ocean liner story. An ocean liner story that's sealed in him. And what have I told you, my viewers? Beauty doesn't come from these scantily clad women parading around and being narcissistic and stuck up. Long-lasting legacy, time-enduring classic material comes birthed out of tears, birthed out of tragedy. That the loss of his beloved wife and children on a seagoing liner over the Atlantic caused him on another liner to pen the words of a song that's become, to my opinion, immortal. I'm not ashamed to show my passion about something, because when I look at people today, they sure don't have passion anymore. And if people want to look at me as a boat nerd or a geek for getting into this, I'll deal with it. Because what they're getting into today, to me, is fit for the dumpster. No offense. The ocean liner world, the ocean liner history is rich. It's huge. It was the way to get around. We haven't even begun to talk about the coastal steamers on the Pacific and the ships that came back and forth from Japan and Asia. The Pacific is littered with wrecks as well. And a very sad end to the Ile de France. It was sold to Japan for scrap, but the American Hollywood filmmaking company went to the Japanese and said, before you scrap it, can we film a movie on it? The Japanese said, sure. Sadly, because of Americans' love for the cheap and Americans' thrill for disaster and 91 minutes of seat-gripping terror and danger and adrenaline-pumping stuff, the set showed the Ile de France being blown apart, bulkheads caving in, water coming in, ship on fire, funnel falling over. And this is what we do with our leftover history. People took the old cars back then and said, this is no good. Let's push it over a hill and see how fast it goes before it hits that rock and blows the front end apart. The French were so incensed that they told the Americans, please remove any name, anything that will point to our beloved Ile-de-France. You may laugh as an American and go, oh, what a bunch of dweebs, man. They got all sentimental over a ship. I get sentimental over a ship. A ship carried life. A ship was life. A ship was a way of life. A ship was so much wrapped up in it. And to see a beautiful liner come to a very profane end like that, for a bunch of people to sit in a theater and watch a ship get torn to smithereens, that became the symbol of our culture. Now, my memory fails me. I think it was... I'm trying to think. There were two German ships. There was the Vaterland and the Berengaria. And I think the Vaterland became the Leviathan when it was taken and seized by the U.S. in World War I. And the Berengaria, I think, was actually, the original name was the Imperator. Both huge ships. Beautiful, beautiful, luxurious ships. As big as the Titanic, if not bigger. And one of them, to take the claim as the longest ship, put this huge, I believe it was gold-covered, big eagle on the bow of the ship. And what's interesting is it went through an Atlantic storm so horrific that the crew on the bridge noticed that a certain wave, a rogue wave, came up and almost as if it was a hand, reached up and plucked the whole mess from the bow and ripped it off. So heavy was it, it immediately dropped in the depths of the Atlantic and lost its big eagle figurehead. I read a lot about these ships. I read a lot of cool stuff on these ships. People that met their spouses, people that met other magnates from other companies and became rich because of them. Just all kinds of cool stuff connected with the whole ocean liner history. Anybody know who J.P. Morgan is? We got an investment firm named after him. John Pierpont Morgan, millionaire. He was scheduled to sail the maiden voyage of the Titanic. And I don't remember if it was a business interruption or he took sick, but he canceled it a day before. Fortunate for him. There were many stories of people that canceled their voyage. I was sitting in an ice cream parlor in Duluth, Minnesota after Sunday night church. It was customary for the people at Emmanuel Baptist to go over to Bridgman's in Duluth Heights and have an ice cream social afterwards. There was a gentleman I sat next to who was a very staunch German, and he was intimidating just by his mere body language, Mr. Galswick. We were all sitting at the table, and one guy who was what they called a locomotive nerd was into the railroad stuff. And I said, I'm into the Titanic. And Mr. Galswick put his spoon down and he says, you interested in the Titanic, huh? I said, yes, I've been fascinated by it for years. And with a very quiet voice, he said, when I hear about that ship, it gives me the chills. He said, my mother almost booked passage on that ship in 1912. But something canceled it, and she had to book it on a later date to another ship. That is the closest I've ever come to somebody that connected to it. What people don't understand about my love of ships is it was a simple thing at first. But my love of the Titanic, the story grabbed me because as I'm reading A Night to Remember by Walter Lord, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is a ship? This sounds like a floating town. Me doping along in my stupid naivety, and there were no pictures in it. I went to the library and said, "Do you have an encyclopedia? I want to look up this Titanic." So the first time I saw a picture of it, I was like, whoa. Well, I loved winter, so that got me into icebergs. And that got me into Antarctica. And that got me into the Atlantic. Then it got me into immigration. Then it got me interested in Europe. You wouldn't believe all the spin-offs because it was related to the Titanic that got me into it. The International Ice Patrol. And suddenly, when I chased after Beth, in my mind mentally, I had a huge earthquake fault shift. I left in my mind the cold North Atlantic and said, now I'm going to go to my ocean, the Pacific. Those big ships didn't sail that ocean. The only one to sail it, to my knowledge, was the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary, actually, I believe, went to Australia, I think. I don't recall. I'd have to look that up. During World War II, but I'm not positive. These ships were so big that New York and other ports of call had to enlarge their docks and dredge their harbors deeper just to permit it entry. So when I was married to my wife of 14 years, living down at the Grosvenor Arms apartment on 16th and Logan, a 1930s building with walls 2 feet thick, crossbar-style windows, the old grill that hid the radiator, the wrought iron black grill, hardwood floors, brick building, beautiful terrazzo floors, an old elevator with the old knob push buttons. Very cool building. Discovery Channel was having its week-long ships, and more ships. And I was just sucking up this stuff. And one night they had a program of all the relics they had pulled off of the seafloor after Robert Ballard located the ship in the 1980s. They pulled up suitcases and all kinds of stuff, and I was shocked at what survived and what didn't. The teak decks long ago rotted away, and yet when they opened a suitcase completely underwater, they've got all these things sitting there on display, and I see this brochure, Hotel Duluth. Wow. Somebody on the Titanic had a brochure for the Hotel Duluth. It's called the Gray Salon. It still stands down on Superior Street. In my collection of things, I have a silver platter from that says Hotel Duluth stamped on the bottom of it. The Titanic got me to study people and cultures. Whenever I heard the mention of Ireland, the first thing that came in my mind is Belfast, Harland and Wolff, the greatest shipbuilding yards. It opened up my mind geographically, culturally, got into antiques. I would go through antique stores and see pieces of furniture and said, wow, this is cool stuff. So it's more than just a boat. A way of life has left us, people. And the life you've inherited now in this culture is a real bill of goods, let me tell you. There's a part of me that romanticizes things. My voice is a little bit hoarse. But how about the people of prominence back then that had a voice like this? Pass me a cigar, Bill. The people that walked the decks. The White Star Line, which owns the Titanic, was under the International Mercantile Marine, which was financed in large part by J.P. Morgan. Bruce Ismay was a scoundrel, the managing director of the White Star Line, the chicken-heart coward that jumped into a lifeboat ahead of women and children. With 1,503 lives lost, the coward could think only about saving himself, while the ship's builder, Thomas Andrews, stood in his room looking at a painting. And a stewardess came up to him and said, "Aren't you going to have a try for it, Mr. Andrews?" And he stood there and didn't move, and went down with the bowels of the mightiest liner of its day. On the one hand, complete irony of men who, instead of trying to save their butt, distraught that just a couple days before he had written in his journal and shared with somebody that the coat racks were unsatisfactory in the main hallways. 2 days later, realizing that none of that was going to matter at all. To a guy who was locked in his stateroom, or a woman who was locked in her stateroom cabin, couldn't get out, and another passenger heard her banging and tried the knob, and he threw his weight against it and busted the door. And a steward came up and says, "I will report you to the White Star Line for destruction of company property." And in today's vernacular, I can imagine the guy saying, "Go for it, dude. The thing's sinking. You go ahead. Give me a ticket, okay?" The story of the Titanic is more than that silly little movie. There's a lot of details most of you viewers will never, ever, ever even know. The story of the Titanic, that if you change any single item in it, it never would have sank. Number one, the Titanic was leaving England and backing out of its berth and going down. The suction of such a huge ship caused another ship's lines and hawsers to snap, the SS New York, ironically, that the ship started drifting and was heading on a dead-end collision into the stern of the Titanic. Some quick-thinking tugs butted up against the New Yorker and shoved it out of the way, just missing a collision, which was photographed by a priest. I believe his name was Father Murphy, who rode the Titanic from England to Ireland, took pictures, and then did a motor car tour across Ireland. He took legendary pictures, the only of their kind, of life and stuff on the Titanic. Those pictures are worth a fortune. There is one last picture of the Titanic. It's in the distance, so it's not a clear picture as it's sailing off the coast of Cobb, Ireland. It is the last reported photograph of the Titanic as it left on its last and only voyage. There was so much superstition surrounding that ship that as the ship was nearing Ireland, a boiler stoker climbed up the fourth dummy smokestack that was used for ventilation. He was inside it and climbed up the ladder and peered his head over the top. And some passengers said, "Oh my gosh, look at that. That's an omen." Many people were superstitious in the Victorian era. For those of you that are into architectural style, the Titanic had a lot of Edwardian era architectural styling and furnishings inside of it. When we say the Titanic was luxurious, let me put it to you in absolute terminology of fact. In 1912, it cost $10 million to build the Titanic. Contrast that to the Costa Concordia, which sang off Giglio, Italy, after ramming a rock and the captain deserted it, and they just finally removed it recently, at the tune of a huge expense of salvage operation. The ship was $560 million and value insured for $440 million. And let me tell you, the Costa Concordia is not luxurious at all. The Titanic had mahogany and oak and cherry, and even the baseboard and headboards of the beds in first class were white painted metal with brass knobs on the ends of them, and the doors to the staterooms and the interior motif, the detailing that went into the ceiling with panels and raised and insets and mother of pearl inlay, fireplaces in the rooms adorned with decorative stuff. They spared no expense. Many people believe the Titanic sank because it was carrying with it a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khan, which was encased in gold. Some say that there was actually a mummy being transported on the Titanic stored just behind the bridge, which many people say was also an omen. Pacific doesn't believe in superstition, but it is a fact that if the Titanic had collided with the New Yorker, it would have delayed its voyage. If there had been enough damage, the ship would have probably had to disembark all its passengers and cancel the sail. Something else you don't know about that's very interesting is what the White Star Line did when they had a coal strike and a coal shortage going on in 1912. White Star Line stole from its coal bins, robbed from other coal supplies that was slated for their own other ships just to make this maiden voyage possible. No joke. If the Titanic had taken a slightly southerly course, it wouldn't have hit the iceberg. If the Titanic had lessened speed by just a bit, it wouldn't have hit the iceberg. There is much debate about the numerous radio transmissions that the Titanic received about ice. Unfortunately, the Marconi room operator, I think his name was Harold Phillips. It was him and a younger guy. And he got impatient when the ice calls were coming in, and he says, "Stay out, I'm working Cape Race." Mind you, the millionaires paid money to send telegrams via ship to shore. That was novel. The Titanic was a symbol of humanistic arrogance at its zenith for its day. The Titanic had no GPS, no surround sound system. The heating system would be antiquated by today's standards, but it was steam heated, complete with radiators, no air conditioning. The Titanic could never sail to Hong Kong. The people would have burned up inside of a ship like that with stifling, stuffy heat with all that woodwork and deep, thick carpeting and overstuffed chairs. The Titanic was made for the North Atlantic. Pacific is proud to say that there's nothing wrong with having a hobby. It's too bad they're gone. The ship I identify with the most is, there's two left. The SS United States, which I'm not sure where it's sitting right now. I think it's in Philadelphia, but it's just a couple months ago they said they were going to scrap it unless they could raise money to keep paying docking fees. It would not be economically sound judgment to even waste one's time with an old relic like that simply because the state America's in today, the last thing we should do is have the government spend money to make a flagship again. It's wasteful. But yet at the same time, I'm sad. I'd love to see a ship like that symbolize what once was the ability of the American spirit to say, hey, we're not going to make a luxury ship, but we're going to make a ship that'll blow the doors off everybody speed-wise and show its power prowess. We were good at that. I could go on and on about things about the Titanic. There's numerous things that if any one thing changed, they never would have sank. When they had the final British inquiry and the American inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic, they interviewed Frederick Fleet and grilled him over and over about how big the object appeared that was described as the iceberg, and it was basically 2 courtroom tables put together. He was asked over and over, if you had a pair of binoculars, would you have spotted this sooner? And I think that he said that the answer was yes, that they had a shortage of binoculars, and his were not given him. They were taken by a lookout on the bridge. Frederick Fleet was the one who grabbed the crow's nest, megaphone or whatever you call it, and shouted down at the bridge and said, iceberg, dead ahead. But mind you, in the 1912 technology, when we talk about cars and their fine handling, when you have a ship 882.5 feet long by 92.6 feet wide by 175 feet from keel to topmost smokestack, you're not going to turn that baby on a dime. The amount of time it takes from the command given through the wheel down to the engine room to turn that rudder and for that ship to start moving is fatal. If the Titanic had chosen to hit the iceberg head on, it would have crumpled the bow into the first 2 watertight compartments, definitely the first one. It would not have been enough to sink the ship. With a badly mangled, snubbed nose of a beautiful ship, she could have still sailed into New York Harbor and then undergone repairs. The decision to turn is what sliced the side, popped the rivets, and allowed the water to roar in. But it's remarkable when you think it had 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. Adding insult to injury, telling every passenger on there, oh my gosh, if we only had enough boats, we would have had enough time to get everybody off of here. And Bruce Ismay gets off the Titanic, managing director of the White Star Line. Typical corporate buffoon. Screw everybody else. While Mr. and Mrs. Isidore Strauss, the owner of the famous Macy's department store in New York City, lost their lives. And I don't remember if it was them or another millionaire couple said, and some other men said, we are prepared to die like gentlemen. No panic, no pushing. Have you ever gotten on an airplane in the U.S.? I had to go to Michigan once to do a connect flight to Akron, Ohio, and I couldn't believe how rude the passengers were getting off that plane. In 1956, in July, the summer, a very beautiful smaller ocean liner called Andrea Doria, Italian through and through, was rammed in a dense fog by the Norwegian liner, the Stockholm. Its knife-shaped bow cut deeply into the inner parts of the Doria. Another mistake. The captain did what anybody would do, put the engines in reverse when he suddenly noticed the ship. What he should have done is not backed out. With the Doria shish kebabbed on the bow of the Stockholm, both ships would have stayed afloat. Everybody could have got on off of them. The whole mess could have been towed into New York Harbor. And they could have put dry docks under both of them, surgically removed them, repaired them both. True story. We make decisions based on what we're used to. Looking back, and what's ironic is a woman on the Stockholm, typical Scandinavian stoic, unfeeling, uncaring, The Andrea Doria collision, was it bad? And her response was cool. Yes, it was terrible. I lost my skis. Her skis were in the forward compartments of the Stockholm that was badly mangled and damaged and torn apart, entering the hull of the Andrea Doria. Several people spent hours trying to find a jack to jack up part of a crushed cabin to get a man who was trapped under material, to no avail. And the man said, "Look, you've done so much to help me, thank you, but please, get out while you still can." The only people that died on the Doria were those who were knifed by the prow of the Stockholm coming through their cabins when they were asleep in the middle of the night. The Andrea Doria took 11 hours to sink. It was said that the crew bailed the ship first. Interesting. The Ile-de-France that I told you about that was blown apart in a movie set for American Movie, that was nearby, and it took many passengers over from the sinking Doria. It was the first ocean liner ever to be recorded on the national media here in the U.S. with helicopters flying and watching this great ship roll over and then go down. There's a man whose nickname is Mr. Doria who has made dives on it every summer hundreds of times. And his house is lined with a shelf or something around the top part of the ceiling with plates and dinnerware he has retrieved from the kitchens of the Andrea Doria. Very dangerous wreck to dive. People have died on it. It's only in 300 feet of water laying on its side. So, it'd be interesting to see how many views this video gets. We're talking about the death of a culture. We're talking about a form of transportation that was anything but boring. And I just wanted to share with you my heart. There are many times I look at my life a lot like that era and go, there's not too many of us left that think the way I think. And I feel like I'm a dinosaur in a way. Because to be hip in this generation, you got to throw everything out the window. I've had the blessed privilege of seeing some things, hearing the stories of old people and reading about a piece of history called the transatlantic steamship era that's given me a rich depth to my knowledge and understanding of the world and the way things work. One closing vignette from my personal drama of Hong Kong and Beth. When I went over to see Beth for the first time, I felt like that painting. The Queen Mary boldly sailing across the Pacific, brightly painted, beautiful, regal, massive. And even though I enjoyed the trip, there was a huge letdown in things that I saw. And it wasn't just a few days after I got back. And I remember it happened when I was in the Philippines. We were walking around and I had sandals on. I'm like, why do my feet hurt so bad? I got a pain that showed up, and it's been there ever since. And every time I think of it, it reminds me of the Philippines. It wasn't until a year later that I went to a doctor and had him check it out. And he says, "Oh, you got plantar fasciitis." Plantar what? I can't walk around barefoot except on the sand. I got to have shoes on, and I can't stand in one place for any length of time. I can walk, and I can walk 26 miles, but I can't stand. I can stand for a while, but it hurts. So I've got a reminder and a souvenir from the Philippines. There will always be a reminder. And when I come back and things went from bad to worse, I had written my whole journal about that experience, the whole 2 weeks there. And I vow to you, my viewers, if I get my hands on it again and bring it down here, or I end up in Washington, I will do a video just reading that in its entirety. You will be very interested in it. I would like to read it again to remind myself of some of the things, the newness of it all, and Hong Kong and the first flight and Philippines and everything. But as I write in that journal, I start to look at things more objectively about her. A month after returning to Colville and making this decision because of my cousin's crazed wife, and because of a limited job market in a small town in northeastern Washington, I made the decision to relocate to Spokane. Got a cute $325 a month studio apartment that I loved for the whole year I was there. Had a walk-in closet with a built-in desk that I put my laptop at. I'd shut the door with all my hanging clothes. It was so quiet in there. Nobody could hear me, and I could talk and chat online, and it was fun. And because of what I experienced in Hong Kong and Beth and her niece living in a room that actually was the size of my walk-in closet, I pulled my mattress in there and said, I'm going to try sleeping in this and see what it's like. I actually liked it. A month after that, I had broke up with her. Because I just realized this isn't going to work. This woman is rude to me. Something's not right. Something's not right. And you know the rest of the story, so we're not going to rehash that. But then I had a picture in my mind of the Pacific in a full-blown storm and the old movie footage where the color disappears and it's suddenly black and white, but you see the ship's lights and you see the wind blowing spray across the decks of the ship and the wind hitting that spray so hard it's just vaporizing it. And I had this picture in my mind of me limping the ship back to the west coast of Washington, docking it, and the engine room's flooded, windows are broken, deck railings are bent because of the waves and the horrific force, and the engine shut down and the ship's just sitting there with water dripping all over everything. And I end up back in Spokane, and that's always been a picture default mode of mine. And guys walking on board the ship going, wow, I can't believe this thing survived that voyage. We got a lot of cleanup to do in here. I did love her. And maybe some of it was more infatuation-based because I'd never had such contact with such brown skin exotic beauty. Maybe it was my insecurity that because of all the failures I'd done and all the laughing and rejection I got, I thought, now I'm going to go to the big time. I'm going to marry a foreign woman. I'm going to bring her here. Maybe it was symbolic of me crossing the ocean I was born on, and it was symbolic of transatlantic travel, but in a different way, that I was sailing my ship across the ocean. Maybe it was all that and more, which it was. I admit to my viewers that from anybody standing outside, they could look at me and go, you were kind of stupid. I was. I'm honest enough to say I've made some really dumb mistakes, knowing that I shouldn't have made them at all when I had all the signs in place. We men are kind of stupid that way. We can be guilty of following our heart too. So Queen Elizabeth burns up in Hong Kong Harbor, and the Queen Mary still sits in Long Beach. Pacific Ocean is still sailing on. On a sobering note, Beth will never get married. She's in an age where nobody will visa her, nobody will fight for her age. She's 54 now. Unfortunately, with Asian women, the percentages of people that marry women when they hit their 50s from Asia is slim to zero. Part of me feels bad that all that happened because it just is shameful. But I also look back and go, but she didn't work with me. She didn't appreciate me. And I don't think that she was ever interested in my heart. And yet, through that epic voyage of going over there, yeah, that's a blister. That's from hard work. I learned a lot about women and a lot about our culture and a lot about Asian culture. And you know what? I don't understand a lot of women. I don't understand what motivates a lot of women. I know the book, Women Are From Mars, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I know all that. But why would a woman get on my date site and a year later tell me how ugly and dorky and terrible looking I am? I don't get it. I ask myself the question over and over, did I step outside the will of God by even pursuing Beth to begin with? And you want to know what the answer is? Yes. I've also asked myself, what if I'd have pursued Listy? The Bible says, do not be unequally yoked. Tale of two women, but it's not a tale, it's true. One from Tangerang, Indonesia, one from Miagao in the Philippines. The one who was a Christian was nasty, was demanding, was childish, was rude. Listy was 15 years younger than me, 20 years younger than me. Sweet, passionate, mature, expressive, full of warmth. And I kick myself over and over and go, why was I so stupid most of my life? I don't know. I wish I could take the knowledge I have now and go back to 16 years old and do it over again. But hindsight is always 20/20. I have no apologies and I have no remorse about the things I've said about our culture of women today. I have no problem talking about it. I feel empowered. I feel liberated to say what I need to say that years ago I never would have dreamed of saying for fear. I feel like this is something that needs to be done. Not just that issue, but all the issues that Pacific Ocean Asia raises on YouTube. We've got to be critical thinkers. And when a Muslim woman is kinder, warmer, more passionate to me than Christian woman Beth, or Exhibit B, or Christian women I meet in churches here that are dead and yet stuck up. And the biggest thing that they get caught up in is their SUV and their Starbucks and their dog and their silly K-love, K-crap praise music. And I'm a 48-year-old man who's had some rich, knowledgeable, wonderful times of being alone in Duluth and soaking up all the seafaring history and fascinating stories of an ocean liner world now gone, and people telling me, man, you seem like you've gone to college. Well, I have. It's a college of hard knocks. It's a college of life 101. It's a college of making your own mistakes and finding out the hard way. People reading in a textbook and learning facts don't amaze me. I'd rather listen to the story. I don't want to listen to a successful CEO with a suit and tie. But tell me a story about Robin Graham, who sailed around the world at 16 years of age and met his wife. And the last I heard, they lived somewhere in Montana, but sailed around the globe, and it took them years, and got right up to National Geographic and became a Christian after that whole epic voyage. I'd rather hear his story any day. America has become a boring, boring, boring place. You watch our commercials and they're full of death. Now you can shop at home and just click online for Walmart. Wow, woohoo, exciting. Coming to Red Lobster for a shrimp fest. Hyper commercial, hyper music. Showing pictures of food that really don't look that way. Or the car commercials that are just machine gun fire. Because if you're not driving a Jeep, you're not driving. I'd rather ride across the ocean on an ocean liner. I'd rather swing a machete in the jungles. There's an Indiana Jones part of me, even at 48 years old, and I've even said, and I'm going to tell my viewers in on a very secret. I'm letting you into an inner sanctum. At this point, I don't care if I go out dying. I want one last adventure that has purpose and significance than to die and wilt on these shores of a humdrum trying to make a living existence with a bunch of dead people with attitudes and stupid drivers and stupid people in a culture that's just swirling in a toilet bowl full of brown floaties every day. I'm sick of it. Give me the risk of being on a ship in a full-blown typhoon and living to tell about it, and you'll be watching my video. You're not going to watch a video of me talking about making some Tupperware bowl and making millions. And wearing a suit and tie and talking in corporate speak. Something raw about chasing an exotic beauty across the ocean. Something raw about feeling the heaving of a ship and hearing that steel groaning. Waves pounding its deck and getting to the other side to tell about it. To see the power of God in his very creation, and you're at the mercy of his hand. No props to fall on. So what? You got lifeboats. You could have a storm so bad it'd flop that thing over and you don't have a chance to get off. I don't want to live my life in obscurity. I don't want to live my life just piddling out where nobody cares. I don't know what I want. I can't put a definition on it. But I know this. I want something more than what I have. I'm screaming for it. I'm begging for it. Passion, man. Something to talk about. Something to chase after. Something raw and rugged and powerful. Something that makes me stronger. Something that brings me closer to God. Something that moves me more than this current culture is. Last night I just took a break. Friday night. It was a rough 3 days. No, I didn't have trouble on the job, but it's just long, cold days driving in slick, snowy conditions. And I admit, as I get older, I notice I'm very good at what I do, but I can tell I'm aging, viewers. I find myself being much more cautious, and yet still full of adrenaline and life. I find myself thinking about things more and the implications. Well, if I do that, this could happen. Nope, not going to do that. Whereas in my 20s, okay, let's do it. Oops. I'm changing. Can I say this? Looking at numbers on my videos gives me hope. Looking at the fact that my videos don't just have 15 or 20 views, but they're in the hundreds consistently. That makes me feel valued. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm doing something. Not sure what all the time. I mean, this is just a rant, isn't it? One of my viewers Skyped me a message saying, God has really been blessing me lately, and I don't know why. I'm so sinful. And I wrote him back, and I said, God blesses us in spite of ourselves. Isn't God good? He's even good to Pacific. And I don't deserve it. None of us do. We're supposed to take captive every thought of the obedience of Christ. I don't do that. Let no unwholesome communication come out of your mouth. I don't do that. Yeah, I got a long way to grow. But don't we all? So, I said I was going to end this, and I keep going and going. No script. We just talk from the heart. None of what I said is made up. None of this is baloney. It's all true. Viewers, you're probably asking me, do you ever think about Bat? Do you ever wonder, do you want to see her? I wish I could see her on Skype. I wish we could talk. Say, look, we need to talk. But I'm afraid she'd never listen. Typed in her name the other day, and I see she's on more social media. I don't know why. One of the pictures she has is the one I took of her down at Hong Kong Harbor, with a Mickey Mouse shirt on. Yeah, I think about it. People ask, would you take her? Unfortunately, I'm too jaded. It would depend on so many circumstances, the biggest of which would be she'd have to literally fall on her face and say, I'm sorry. I get it now. I wasn't very nice to you. I believe God can make a way. But sometimes we run ahead with our own agenda, believing God can make a way, and God says, I'm not going to make a way because I'm not in this. Listy went on to marry a guy who has a drinking problem in England. The last time I chatted with her, we were chatting via Facebook, and I said, how do you like it over there? She was pregnant and due to receive a first child with him. First child ever. She said her husband was very good to her, but she says, I don't like it here. England is very cold. Not just weather, but there's no warmth for the people here. And I said, I had a feeling you were going to find that. She misses her village. She misses her people. She misses her culture. That's why Pacific increasingly is not pro-America going to another country and pushing their ways on them. I watched some traditional Philippine dance. They don't even touch each other. The man and the woman, and they're dancing. It's cool. And Maharani says, we're losing that, Pacific. It's going away. The young people don't get into this anymore. I've told Maharani, and I'll tell my viewers, the young people, by and large, not all of them, but by and large, are putting their head down the cultural toilet bowl and flushing repeatedly. But there's exceptions. When a 23-year-old man from Cleveland can tell me, I love the old, he watched a 1950s video on Akron with the old cars and the old buildings, and he said, what a cool place Akron was. I said, yeah, Akron used to be a nice town before the rubber industry folded up. A 23-year-old American male likes the old antique buildings and the old stuff. And how many people do we meet in that age category today? I think most young girls today don't even know what an antique is. Sometimes I get a snotty comment by some snotty teenage brat. "You're old, mister." And I just smile and say, "Yep, and you'll be there one day too. Trust me. If you don't kill yourself between now and then." I don't add that part. There's nothing wrong with looking back at the way things used to be. There were some things that were good. There were. There were real men, and there were real ladies. And there were ladies that dressed appropriately and had manners and a way of carrying themselves. This whole instant age, the whole jet age, opened up a whole new era of instant, instant, instant. Two-hour flight from Denver to Spokane, and a baby starts crying, and I watch the suits and the ties getting very, very PO'd, writhing and turning around and glaring. I just chuckled. Thought, gosh, I'm glad it's only 2 hours of this. I don't envy the well-to-do, because they get ticked off a lot easier. A lot of things bother them. They think because of their money they can order this perfect little world, and they can't. They don't own the plane. They got to fly with the rest of us peons, and it drives them nuts. But the book of Daniel closes with something rather cryptic. "Go your way, Daniel, for many will run to and fro, and knowledge will increase, and then the end will come." Do you not get the implications of that verse? We are traveling more now and going faster and faster, and knowledge has exploded with the advent of the internet and how we can access information so fast. Trust me, we're headed somewhere. This voyage that we're all on is going to come to an end one day. Individually, but globally. There's going to be a day when God slides that big giant brass handle, ching, 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 finished with engines at last, and Judgment Day is going to come down. I used to write poetry. I don't have them anymore. Well, some of them I have in my box, several boxes of things up in Colville. I went through a very hard time being alone in Duluth in the cold, stoic environment, the freezing cold weather, and even working at the bus company and trudging 1 mile, riding the city bus to its end terminus, and walking a mile out in the country to have dispatchers ridicule me, make fun of me because of the naive way that I was, a boss that was cold as ice and never opened up, and I'm trying to understand Duluth culture, which was cold as an iceberg. And I descended into a lot because of the moodiness of the weather. It caused me to think deeper and caused me to look at life. Being alone does that to you. Being in adverse weather does that. If you don't believe me, take a look at Tchaikovsky and the Russian composers, some of the most beautiful, powerful, deep, intense classical stuff, and look at where they lived. Long, dark, cold winters. Why do you think they all drink vodka? But even for me, I wrote a lot of poetry where my life was a ship. Superstructure gleaming white. The sun hurries back into night. Black hull rising majestically out of the water. Storm clouds gather. Engines strain. In the air, the threat of rain. That I wrote, along with the rest of it. I can't remember verbatim. I even wrote one where I was sailing my ship and it sank in a bad storm, and the master reached down and plucked my hull from the bottom, took me to dry dock and cleaned me up and set me sailing again. That was my symbolism of my conversion to Christianity. I even wrote one about my grandpa called The Old Man in the Sea, the title being at play off of Ernest Hemingway's legendary book about the old man that goes out and catches one of the biggest fish, and the sharks and everything eat it up, and he comes back and tries to tell everybody, and they think, the old man's been in the sun too long, he's lost his mind. Pacific's no dummy, he's just done dumb things. I am not impressed with Yale and Harvard and deans and professors and people with degrees. But I listen to experience. I listen to people who tell me their stories that are true. I read stories of men who knew how to write, and women too. You'll laugh. I even read a lot of girl books. The Man from the Desert, Anne of Green Gables. Fascinating, well written. Prince Edward Island, a little red-haired girl. The Hobbit, Chronicles of Narnia. I read a book called Foundation Franklin. Actually, the book was by Farley Mowat. You can look it up online. But you're only going to get into this if you're into ships. I don't think any of my lady viewers would be into this book at all. It's about the dirty business of operating a salvage tug off the coast of Newfoundland. True story. Big, powerful tug called Foundation Franklin that had a radio and telegraph sent of ships in distress, and they send a telegraph back saying, do you need assistance? They had to get permission from the captain to assist, otherwise they wouldn't get paid. Decisions whether to try to tow the ship to a beach so it wouldn't sink, making salvage possible, making decisions when the ship starts dragging down to cut the line so that the tug doesn't go with it. They weren't the only one. There were many tug companies fighting for salvage work. That's how they made their money. And sailing off the coast of Newfoundland and some of the bad seas. I read a book called A Winter's Tale in Duluth about a passenger liner that sank right off of somewhere in Newfoundland and rocky, craggy coast, and right around the 1920s. And I read books about the Mataafa, which was a ship that got butted around in a storm on Lake Superior and trying to get into the Duluth Ship Canal. And the storm was so bad nobody could get to it, and the men couldn't get off the ship. And the ship sank, but the water was shallow enough, broke in 3 parts. The men froze to death. People on Park Point, Duluth, Minnesota, lit bonfires to try to warm their spirits. The Thomas Wilson, a whaleback steamer, just outside on the bay of Lake Superior, was rammed by another ship in a dense fog. It sank. It's in 60 feet of water. You can dive down to it today. And everybody knows the infamous Edmund Fitzgerald, 1975. Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? A question everybody asks when suffering comes. Lake Superior has so many shipwrecks. The Great Lakes passenger steamer, the America, in a dense fog, slammed bow first up on the rocky edge peninsula of Isle Royale. Jutted into the air, got the passengers off. The storm was so bad, it bobbed the ship slid back and sank. A dispatcher in Duluth, Minnesota, has dove off the wreck of the passenger steamer America. He told me a story about a diver who went on the ship, deep inside the ship, found a gold ring, got his air hose tangled up, got disoriented down in there, died. Divers went to retrieve the body, found him dead, clutching the gold ring. No, my love of ships is deep. They're stories, real stories, bravery, cowardice, arrogance, humility, tyranny, all at the hands of weather and ships and disasters. Fascinating stuff. I hope that I've whetted some of you all's appetite. Another story is a gentleman showed up a few weeks ago where I work. He says, "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you when you worked here in the 90s. I just restarted again here." I said, "No, who are you?" He says, "I remember you because we were at the other terminal. And we were on a break and you were telling your stories of ships and the Great Lakes, and I couldn't believe how much you knew." And that fascinated me. I said, "I'm so sorry, I forgot who you are." I said, "Do you know how many miles and how much experience and how much stuff I've seen and done since I left there in 99? He hasn't changed much at all. In fact, many of the people that are there now that were there when I came back that never left, nothing changed." And it hit me. Pacific, you've been through a lot of ups and downs. You made a lot of mistakes, but you have changed. You have experienced so much. Legend lives on from the Chippewa on down on the big lake they call Gitchagumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early. Yeah, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot, Canadian singer. Let me tell you two pieces from that if you didn't hear it in my other videos in the past. He's dead now, so I can mention his name. His name was Chuck Montgomery. He was my landlord. He rented to me the building on the corner of Lake and 4th Street, 1 West 4th Street. Big billboard underneath my living room window giving the address. I rented the upper floor, little 1-bedroom apartment. It was cool. Like $275 a month or something. I had a direct view of Lake Superior from my window. Looked right down the hill. Lake Avenue was the divider between East and West Duluth. Just to my left, I could see the old Central High School made out of brownstone, the huge building with a big central clock tower. And on my right out my window, was Washington Junior High, big brick block-sized school. There's stories just in that. They shut down the school, but the old fire alarm, there was a leak in the roof. And every time the water leaked when the snow melted, it would run down along a line, triggering the fire alarm to go off. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm in a peaceful sleep. The alarm goes off, and every fire truck in Duluth shows up. Sirens blaring, lights going. zinging off the walls of my bedroom, even with the drapes shut. I was like, good grief. Chuck came over to my place one day. I paid him the rent, and I had a bookcase that was made for me at the time, and I had all my ship stuff on it. And I had some display stands of my Titanic stuff, and he saw the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. He picked up the book. He says, "You've read this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was on the Arthur M. Anderson, the ship that was 15 miles behind her, the night it sank." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I worked down in the engine room, 4 hours on, 4 hours off." He said, "I'd gone to bed, and I woke up in the morning, and my crewmates came out and said, 'Chuck, the Fitz sank.'" "The Fitz?" "Yeah, it's gone. It's completely disappeared off radar." I said, "Chuck, how bad was the storm?" He says, "Let me put it to you this way. In all the time I sailed the Great Lakes working on those ships," he said, "that was a bad one." He says, "I remember it was a bad one." Sources claim there were 45-foot waves on that lake that night, and those ore carriers were so dang low in the water when they're fully loaded that they just lose stability quick. And it was said that the hatch covers weren't fully secured, so water sloshing around just kept dumping down into the hold, and the ship broke in half and sank, taking all 29 with her. I believe the Edmund Fitzgerald lays in 500 feet of water. The stern section is upside down on itself. And the wreck is actually in pretty good shape. You can still see the paint on it. The cold, fresh water just doesn't deteriorate things like salt water does. Iron ore pellets spilled all over the lake bed. They never did find the crew. They never found bodies washed ashore. They never found remains around the wreck. So when Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song a year later, a woman, I believe, was driving through Ohio. In her car, heard that song come on. And when she first heard it, she said, "Oh, this is a pretty cool song." Then she heard the words. She pulled over her car and started crying. And just lost it. Her husband was one of the crew on the Fitzgerald. She had no idea there was a song coming out, nothing. That's why Pacific's into ships, because there's stories and wives and children and people and cultures and the immigration of America. There's so much that comes out of that. Do any of you know what a widow's walk is? They're predominant in the East Coast. The widow's walk was that flat roof on the top of a Victorian home. Pushed the door open in the attic that went up to the roof, and the women would walk out, and they'd look out across the ocean to see if their husband's ship was coming back. And they were called widow's walks because way back when, many women were made widowed by the unforgiving ocean that took their ships. I love the ocean. But can I tell my viewers something? Pacific's scared of it. I wouldn't want to be out there all by myself in a 26-foot sailboat in the middle of the Pacific. That's freaking nuts. I would be completely terrified. It all looks good when everything's going well and the ships sound, the boats sound, and it's beautiful, clear, and the moon's out. But man, you get out there, you have no safety margin. You have just thrown yourself at the mercy of God. That part pulls me in. A little more comfortable to be on the deck of a big freighter or something, knowing that, generally speaking, these things do make it back and forth. Some crazed old man I don't know where in the U.S. he's from, put a bunch of logs together, made this huge log raft with sails on it, and sailed that across Pacific or the Atlantic or something. I was like, what, are you nuts? That was back in the 70s or 80s. And I read story after story of people that sailed solo around the world, husband and wife couples that sailed. Phenomenal stuff. I envy them because it put hair on their chest and it grew them up fast. I'm sorry, when I look at these geeks in their SUVs, these 40-year-old, 50-year-old men and women that think that they're just in control. And then I read my grandpa's diary entries. Los Angeles is 10 miles astern. I can slowly see the coastline of California disappearing. No cars, no traffic. I love it. I love it. There's something manly about sailing a ship and working a ship and being out there. And how different it must be to get off of that ship and step back on land and get into the traffic and the craziness of people. I would love to have the opportunity to be on a ship and literally see the U.S. go bye-bye for the last time, meaning me leaving it. I want that. I want that experience. My life is so uncertain. We've never lived in a more uncertain time than now. Economies are unsure of themselves. Political leaders that just aren't worth a dang. A young culture that's sticking their head down the cultural toilet. And they don't care about any of what I've just spent 3 hours talking about. Most of them. There's something pretty massive about seeing a big old ship pull into port and watching uniformed captains and crew and real men living in that time. There's something about the other day that pulled on something deep inside of me. When one of our mechanics, a big old strapping meat and potatoes kind of guy, big man, with a deep voice, has all his Ford trucks and just bought a VW Bug. You don't mess with a man like that. He's been a mechanic. He's good at what he does. When my bus broke down last Friday a week ago, he's not sensitive like I am, and yet he's a kind man and he's a teddy bear. And he told me what he had done to the engine and didn't understand why it was overheating. He found out that a grounding wire, he says, I had checked everything and I forgot to attach a grounding wire that had to do with the heating of the sensor gauges. As I was sitting riding my own bus as a passenger, and to see his huge form and him just leaning over that steering wheel and how big he was, and I thought, I wish I had a dad like that. Dad who was a real man. He wasn't a pussy, but he wasn't walking around thinking he's all tough either. Just a hard-working man who sees our culture getting stupid. Where are the men? Where are they? I wanted a dad where I could look up and feel proud. That's my daddy. Anybody messes with his boy, he's going to take care of him. Can I say it? We live in an effed up generation today. And I'm running on some baggage and damage myself. I know I'm a little too sensitive sometimes. Let me illustrate something. The other day I came into work and they rearranged we got two dispatchers. We have the ones that run the two-way radio in their own little office and stuff. And then we have the inside the break room dispatcher who will call us in the break room and say, can you run a route for me? You're here. Can you do this midday? Can you do this early out? Can you do this excursion that just suddenly called in and needs a bus? Yes, yes, yes. Well, they built out this area over the 4 days off and expanded it. Well, it's kind of screwed up. There's 2 time clocks, and now it's hard to get around. It's made things more congested. I come bebopping in there at 5:15, and I go walking over the key box because there's nobody there, and I didn't see the line because everything's all convoluted. And this one short Hispanic gal glares at me, gives me a filthy look, and says, hey, there's a line here. I turned around and said, I'm sorry, I didn't see the line. I said, don't give me an attitude. It was a day, okay? It was a day. The weather, the cold, the idiot drivers, and it had been a long day of 11 plus hours. And I waited in line, got my clocked out, and she comes up and patronizingly pats me on the shoulder and says, don't be so sensitive, I was only kidding. Viewers, I confess, maybe I do have a problem, but I want to turn around and say, and don't tell me how I need to live my life, lady. What is the definition of sensitive to you? Why don't you walk with me in my shoes and maybe you'll understand. She's one of those cute, good-looking girls that I don't waste my time saying hi to because I already know her response. She's one I do ignore. Sometimes she'll park right next to my truck, and I walk and I look out over the skyline of Denver and pretend I don't see her, and she'll go, hey, hi. Can I admit I'm guarded? I don't trust good-looking American women. I don't like them. I've been burned and rejected and laughed and mocked and scarred, so I've learned to say, reject them first. Send them your own body language and says, I don't even want to look your way. She's too stupid to realize that if she was joking, why the foul look and the tone of voice she used. I admit, I like that mechanic. When I first met him, he rubbed me wrong. Nobody told me. I'd parked over where the mechanics parked, and they said, well, those 2 spots over there, you're allowed to park. Well, I parked my truck one day in the wrong spot on accident, and I came out and found a Ford literally crosswise right close to my bumper where I couldn't get out, and I'm like, what idiot parked the truck right in front of my truck where I can't pull out of the parking? Walked in and talked to the mechanics, and it was his, the one that came and got me. The Sport, that's my parking spot right there. It's been my parking spot for years, and I don't like anybody parking in my spot. And inside I'm going, son of a gun. I'm sorry, I didn't know that was your spot. And he'd always call me Sport. And I said, hey, I'm too young to be a sport. And I was offended. Wow, yeah, this big old guy looks down at me like I'm just some whatever. Finally, one day I said, why do you call me Sport? And he chuckled and he says, I call everybody Sport. Everybody. Oh. You see, when I got to know him, nobody's going to F with him. They'd be stupid to. He commands respect by his sheer size, and by his voice of authority, and by his mechanical prowess, and by the fact he looks like he's getting older, but he's all male. Those are the guys I remember from way back when. And I couldn't help but thinking, I wish I had a daddy like that growing up. A dad that I could have felt secure with. Pacific has had no security. None. I'm not getting my viewers to feel sorry for me. I'm using this as therapy. I'm using this to reach into your own hearts, to touch the chord strings and play them on your own hearts to get you to realize your own problems and realize you're not alone in your feelings and doubts and insecurities. When we don't have a loving mother and father, when we don't have a father that makes us secure, it affects us to the core. Pacific is sensitive. Pacific is not like most males, and sometimes I'm thankful for that. Because I look at the way most males go, and I don't want to be like them. No, thank you. But even him, calmly, with his deep voice, said, man, these people are driving like SHIT out here tonight. And I calmly said, I see this all day long. He's older than me. He sees this world changing. I went up to him the other day. I said, thanks for writing on the logbook that it was a grounding wire. I said, it's running fine. I said, and thank you for your mechanical professionalism. I wish I had a mother that taught me about what a lady's supposed to be like. Not a mother who chain smoked and was always angry with me and shoving me away. Sometimes I thought my mother must have worn a steel bra. My family was as dysfunctional as hell. Locked in my room till I was 10 years old, not for 10 years, but come home from school, catch on the door, you're in your room. My mother was not mature as a mother, had no right to have adopted children. They didn't screen people then, apparently, or she buffaloed them all. To hear some nitwit girls call me a whack job and stuff like that, I just shake my head and go, yeah, I got problems, but man, you guys got way more than I do. The first of which is complete and utter denial of reality. No, I've learned a lot, and I see some good things historically that are gone. There were and there are some men out there, and there are some ladies. But what the hell has happened to our culture, folks? What has happened? We've turned our culture into a consumer, me-first, selfish culture. You notice these yuppies and these people that are all after materialism, none of them are interested in ocean liner history or World War II or the Depression. They're not interested in anything of substance anymore. And people who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. And maybe when a very militant, diligent, highly disciplined, trained military people that, whether we agree with their ideology or not, has a complete hatred for us. Maybe it would take them to invade us and knock the stuff out of us to get us to wake up to how stupid we've become. Did any of you pay attention to the news this week? That Russia is flying over the Gulf of Mexico. They've been given permission by other countries to get closer and closer to us. I don't want to set fear because I don't know what's going to happen. But make no mistake about it, a lot of people are tired of our stuck-up narcissistic culture, and a lot of them are waiting for the opportunity to pounce and smash us. Make no mistake about it. And God's judgment is waiting right there. We're a nation that has turned its back on anything of quality, anything of value. You go pay $50 for a pair of shoes today and try to walk on ice with them, and they slip all over the dang place. I remember buying tennis shoes that had good rubber on them that didn't slide on shiny surfaces. You can't get anything of quality today unless you pay the rip for it. When a young guy is driving a '69 Jeep Wagoneer, it says, man, this thing's all steel. And he looks like something out of the Hardy Boys with a happy, normal look. And I think, gosh, I wish I had friends like that. I wish there were men like that were like the Hardy Boys that were, let's take the boat out today and let's go take the girls out and have a picnic on that. There's something about the Hardy Boys that grabs me because we don't live in those days anymore. American men have been reduced to a complete hate campaign by today's modern female. That the only thing most American males are in command of anymore is their penis. Or rather, it's in command of them. Drowning in video games, drowning in porn, drowning in addictions. We're not sailing the seven seas. We're not slaying dragons. We're not swinging bayonets and machetes in jungles, forging new trails. Corporate America's squeezing us into a mold. Corporate America's made it unattainable for us to move up the ranks. Unless you're part of the in crowd or the butt-kissing crowd or play the game crowd. Gone are the days, if James Bissett was alive today, you don't just work your way from a rowboat to a passenger ship. No, you spend years in the Maritime Academy and spend big money to get that degree. The corporate gurus, the Nazis of America have seen to it that they're going to stifle us at every turn and take away individuality, spontaneity, and individual creativity and uniqueness. They're not interested in that. They're interested in monopoly, they're interested in taking your money, and they're interested in ultimately squashing you like a bug. Materialism is a stupid thing to get caught up in. I was there. I can speak with authority. People that are materialistic are immature relationally, immature emotionally in their growth. People that are obsessed with their pets are socially retarded. People that are caught up in getting in debt for cars and SUVs are socially retarded. People caught up in buying as much house as they can, more than they can afford. When you go back to the turn of the century and a farmer and his wife raised 8 kids in a simple farmhouse where they had to share bedrooms. And today's house has a married couple in it and it's huge and there's no kids. Something has gone squewy. That's why I ask you to watch this video of ocean liner culture. It's a cross-section of a lot of stuff. Yes, there's the hobnob snobs. I don't care for them. The Pacific Ocean Asia talks about things and many of you, my viewers, know what I'm talking about. You know that this is happening. You know that the culture is changing fast. The music's playing, but this deck is tilting. And those of us that are in Christ, that have our eyes open, we see it. We've already gotten in the lifeboat through Christ. But I admit, whether it's Maharani talking about her own culture, leaving the old traditions behind, America's really dumping them fast. It's amazing, folks. It's amazing. Watch the video, viewers, and let me know what you think, both of my commentary now and the last of the great liners. Let me know what you think. I love the old ships. They symbolize so much. Yes, there was a lot of materialistic showmanship in those boats. Unfortunately, one of the reasons the ships were so luxurious was to cater to women. Was to get them to feel like they were in a fine hotel and not on a ship. Isn't it amazing what you got to do to curry favor with the females? Now, with all due respect, there's something to be said for a woman that says, Michael, I love you so much. I don't care if we went over in a steel bulkheaded barge with no accoutrements, but just to have each other in our arms and some food and safe passage is all I'm after. When a woman is willing to go down with her husband. Wow. I don't see that in females in America at all. No way. Females are all about what's in it for them at every freaking turn. There are a few exceptions, but I'm telling you, few in contrast to the whole. And, to be fair, there's a big ship disaster today loaded with Americans. A lot of men would be the first jumping off to save their own butts. I ask myself over and over, if you were on a ship, what would you do? I don't know what I would do, because the way people are today, they'd be scurrying around in such a panic, they wouldn't even care that I was there. I know how to swim a little bit. I'd hope we're not in shark-infested or freezing cold waters. But yeah, I wouldn't step in a boat ahead of women and children. I couldn't. But I'd probably be asking a group of guys, said, hey, let's go get those dining room tables out of the first class dining room. They're pretty heavy. We'll make them work. We'll just float on them. I'd be being ingenuous real quick. So I shared with you a little bit of my heart. I hope this is something that resonates with you. I hope you guys and gals consider this a decent video. It is my heart, and it may be a flop, and it may not. But this is a big interest of mine. I don't think I ever showed it, but I have a brass oval keychain that says Captain's Office, SS Titanic. Goes in my pocket every day. Truck and house key are attached to it. My grandpa gave me that. I had another one, and I was stupid enough to give it away to somebody. Bad choice. I wish I never did that. Anyways, let me know what you think. This is Pacific signing off. Bye-bye.